Good.
Okay, no 5 countdown. Hi, everybody. Welcome and good morning. I'm going to call the meeting of the Delaware County Board of Elections for September 13th, 2022 to order. And we will start, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our first item on the agenda is consideration of the agenda. To start with that, we do have minutes that were circulated earlier this week. And so I believe that in order to vote on the minutes, we would need to first start by amending the consideration of the agenda item to consider the minutes.
I'll make that motion. I would check.
All right, all in favor of adding the vote on the minutes to the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. With that, is there any other issues around the agenda that we should discuss before we get started?
Madam Chair, we do have in the audience people who've been patiently waiting from Chester Heights Borough regarding the polling place change proposed at that precinct. And I would ask that we move that up ahead of the report I'm about to give.
Does anybody have any concerns from the board? Taking that out? Okay. Then we will start with that item right after we finish with the consideration of the agenda. Is there any other agenda items that we should consider?
Unless there are other individuals here, please indicate if you're here for a polling place assignment change. Please indicate so. Otherwise, we'll just proceed with the Chester Heights one for now. Jackie? Madam Chair, members of the board, of course, you know Jack McDunn, who supervises our warehouse and also is in charge of logistics that include the assignments of polling places and review of their suitability.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, on the agenda is Chester Heights Borough, currently located at 601 Smithbridge Road, Glen Mills. I was contacted by the JOE. She voiced concerns that the voters would like to move the precinct back into their area. She suggested a building located at 53 Baltimore Pike that was available and willing to host such a polling location. They're trying to move Chester Heights Borough back into their precinct. I contacted the previous fire company who previously allowed us, but they were unable to help us due to the size of the precinct. So I reached out to the property owner, management, to we're using the first floor as a polling location. I had the survey done, it meets the ADA requirements. There are concerns that moving Chester Heights to 53 West Baltimore Pike will not meet the needs of the high volume of voters. So this is not a bipartisan.
Ms. Dunn, I understand that last night, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to receive it and review it, but we received an email from the minority inspector indicating that there was some potentially new information about this polling location and how the voters could be accommodated, including, I think, in terms of size. Is that?
Yes, I did receive that this morning, and I did have one of my staff go out to take another look at the size, and so we have the pictures of it, and the parking is plenty of parking, and I feel like the building does have enough room, but I was not aware of the high volume. So I did not take that into consideration when I first looked into this. But again, the measurements and everything was sent to us in the email.
In light of that email, does it change? Well, I'm going to be seeking, just so everybody knows, I know that there's people here, I think, on both sides of this issue. And for me, I usually look to the recommendation of the warehouse supervisor, and I'm going to ask Jackie for that. I am concerned that the late information that came in last night could have an effect on your recommendation. If that's true, then I would consider whether we should table this item. I still want to hear everybody's comments. I think as board members, these are the types of issues that are very, in some ways, personal, right? Where you vote is very personal. I understand the tension of having a polling, I believe that you all can correct me if I'm wrong, the tension is we have a polling location located in Glen Mills and not in Chester Heights, and the concern is trying to find a way to return that polling location to Chester Heights, and Ms. Dunn said that one of the locations previously used was not available to make that happen. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So do you have a recommendation or has that email, and maybe I'm not saying the email should or shouldn't have changed your view.
Right.
Does it provide any concerns that you would want to then take the opportunity to follow up on?
I would like to table this matter until, maybe next election so we can.
That's a different question. I meant table it to the next board meeting, so.
But yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So I would like to table it.
And for what is your concern?
Just to, honestly, to talk to the party leaders and get a better understanding of what they are desiring and if the building actually meets all the requirements due to the high volume of the voters. So like I said, in the beginning, the first time I sent someone out, I was not aware that the precinct held over 2,000 voters. So I would like to check into that a little bit further to make sure it's not an issue.
So I'm inclined to agree, but everybody's here and you've also waited a long time, and I at least believe at least one person may want to speak on this issue. Am I wrong? Are there people who want to speak on the issue of this polling location? Mr. Driscoll, anybody else? Okay.
I may add a little bit of background for the board.
Yes, please.
We, prior to that email last night from the minority inspector, we were leaning, keeping the polling place at the Garnet Valley Middle School where it is, and here's why. Going back in history, this polling place was once, and there's only one precinct for Chester Heights. This polling place was at St. Thomas the Apostle. And at some point, St. Thomas the Apostle made the determination that between school and other activities and morning mass, it was not a good fit for them. It was at the firehouse, but then when the pandemic arrived, the leaders at the firehouse did not want the risk during 2020 of exposing their first responders to hundreds and hundreds of voters. Next, the other consideration, when we say this is a large precinct, this is the 5th largest precinct in all of Delaware County with approximately 2,300 voters. So it's reasonable to anticipate that this election, in my view, more than 50% turnout, largely in person in Chester Heights, which translates to, north of 1,000 people coming in. So we need a space that's, the upside of this space, the proposed space, is that it does have a lot of covered areas, even on the exterior, where if it's raining or inclement weather, if there was a line, people could be, sheltered from the conditions. There is ingress and egress not only from Baltimore Pike, but also a road elsewhere. But again, the size of the room, that's the area of concern that I have right now. So that's why we're leaning one way, but then this minority inspector report came in. So.
And one thing the minority inspector report said that I'm also concerned about this done is the location being an empty retail space. I do think that we're trying to create stability with moves and polling locations. So I think there's a statement made that the landlord may be committed to continuing as a polling location. And that I would appreciate if it could be verified as part of your further diligence.
Sure.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Lastly, the Garnet Valley School location has ample room.
Do you all have questions for us, Scott? I'm inclined to hear from you.
Yeah, I guess I would just reiterate in reference to the email from Mr. Miller, who I'll take his word for it. He's the minority inspector. Seems to be
I'm working on that assumption that everything in the email may be accurate.
I'm not familiar with Mr. Miller, but he represents that he spoke with the other board members, the majority inspector, the judge of elections, and we can confirm that they have consensus.
Okay.
That's something I'd like to confirm, like to hear from them directly, perhaps. And then in terms of this owner's commitment to making it permanent, well, or at least long-term thing, is that going to be written into the lease or potential tenants? What is the landlord's interest in that? It's all very nice to hear, but I'd like to see something concrete.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I mean, I'll express my general thoughts, on it. I saw everything, and we were able to see, a chain of emails involving local officials and our elected officials. I mean, I kind of, start from the proposition. I think it would increase voter turnout and make it more convenient for the voters to have it in Chester Heights Borough. I mean, I think everybody probably thinks the same thing, that you'd rather have your voting place in your municipality. There's across the street from this building, there's a senior housing that it probably would make it more convenient for them to, just vote across the street. And that it seems to be, large enough. Maybe we can, look at those questions. I just was able to look at the email from last night as we were waiting to start the meeting here today. So, that's where I'd be inclined. I mean, I think if we want to, answer, dot our I's and cross our T's, because that email came in so late, and check with the landlord and answer those last few questions, if we were to defer this to, we do have a meeting later this month. If we were to defer it to later this month just to answer those couple of questions, I would have no objection to that. But, I think probably one of the things, if folks from Chester Heights are here, I mean, Chester Heights has grown exponentially over these last 20 years, and they probably need more than one precinct. So, I don't, other than a large centrally located building, which they don't have in Chester Heights, there's not going to be, a Garnet Valley Middle School located in Chester Heights in the future. So maybe they can look at, more precincts or to handle that. But that's my thought process on it. If we want to kind of dot our I's and cross our T's, but even those couple of small drawbacks in my mind, I'd be more inclined to support the move to that building.
Okay.
Mr. Allen, Mr. McGuinn raises a great point that I know that you considered. If you would, during your report, discuss the issue of large precincts and also small precincts, and thoughts about the future.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Ms. Dunn.
Thank you.
We have multiple people who've asked to speak. We'll start on the left. Are you the woman? Are you the first? Anybody to my left besides her? Would you like to come forward? Thank you. Obviously, please start with your name and address. Sure. And if you can project.
Absolutely. I have no problem projecting. My name is Gina Marie Ellis. I'm the mayor of Chester Heights. I live at 200 Wawa Road. Except for 6 years when I lived in Delaware, I'm a lifelong Chester Heights resident. I loved voting at St. Thomas. It was the Archdiocese who put the kibosh on anyone voting at St. Thomas. I have a couple of things I'd like to address to start. Obviously, I think all people I know, everybody who votes in Chester Heights, every time they come to the election, they say, when are we coming back to our town? Where are we voting in town? Can we please come back to our town? The location that we're looking at is not a retail space. It is an office building. It is currently an empty office building. The Borough of Chester Heights will be renting a portion of the second floor starting January 1st of next year as our municipal office. In that lease that's being negotiated right now is the use of the 1,500 feet of the first floor, which is the lobby, the conference room, the break room behind it, where people can actually sit and fill out their ballots. And then there's a back hallway to leave the break room where they can put the ballot, the machines, and then an egress. So it's a full circle. The people just come in, they follow the serpentine, and they leave. I was in attendance of the meeting last night. It was the majority inspector, the minority inspector, the judge of elections, and the constable. It was all of the elected people by the borough who are tasked with actually throwing the election and putting on election day. They did the visit with the property owner and the property manager, who is here today to answer any questions you have about the building itself, the space, and how much space we're going to be using to run the election. There's going to be tables that are moved, tables that are then going to be brought in. So the minority inspector, who is the first person you see when you walk in, he is very comfortable with where he's going to be sitting and what he's going to be doing. The building is on a large arterial highway. We were told last night by the owner that if the borough wanted to take it out of their budget and create a banner that says, new home of Chester Heights Borough and your new polling location, and a banner to actually hang down the side of the building, they don't have a problem with that either. So as far as getting the information out to our community, I don't think that's going to be an issue. There's newsletters. If you are not tabling this and actually voting today, we have a recycling event on Saturday, and ready ready to go, but not yet press print because of course we're here today, is a postcard that we're planning on handing out to every single resident that comes for Recycling Day. And we get about 800 people on Recycling Day. It's a big, very popular event where we can say, here's your new voting location, here's the new borough office, here's your new voting location. So we can start getting this information out just as soon as the decision is made. Did I address everything having to do with 53? Oh, the judge of elections was there last night as well. As an aside, that's my mom. It's a little strange. Also, there are 400 houses. It's a 300 and some, I think it's 360 houses in the Darlington Woods condominiums, which are within walking distance, safe walking distance, because it's their community, then it's the Borough Street, Walnut Hill Boulevard, right into 53 West Baltimore Pike. So I do think we'd get a much larger turnout if people could literally just walk out their front door and take a little walk and be right at the polling location. The minority inspector, the majority inspector, and the constable all live in the neighborhood behind this. And I joked with them last night that they all drove, but they could have all walked to this polling location. It is no more than 2.5 miles from the furthest distance of someone in Chester Heights. And we're only about 2.5 miles. So point to point, it's only 2.5 miles. It's almost 5 miles to get to the middle school. The other problem we have with the middle school is that we have a lot of voters that live in Chester Heights who don't have kids in the Garnet Valley School District, who've never sent their kids to Garnet Valley. So when we say, oh, it's at the middle school, those of us who are parents who have sent our kids there, we know where it is in our heads. The middle school is like 8 entrances. So my job as the director of communications, not because I'm a politician, but because I care about our constituency, on the borough's budget, I have had signs made that say vote with an arrow. Well, they get stolen, they're everywhere. I'm the one that puts those signs out every night and then picks them up at 11 p.m. on election night, where to vote. And they go all the way down Smithbridge Road. It is not safe, it is not convenient. I mean, personally, it's not a great place to vote. The other thing about the middle school is that the middle school has like 6 buildings when you enter it in. So it's the library, it's the park, it's the middle school. Behind it is the elementary school. There's all, so the sign says like 632, 631, 635. It's like 4 addresses. And there are 6 precincts that vote there. There's like 2 at the library. So then there's all these signs. We have people who come, they're like, I've been on this campus for an hour and I don't know where to go. It's really difficult, especially for our older people who, again, don't have kids there and don't know. They don't ever go down Smithbridge Road. They kind of stay in their little world. This building has been empty for a couple of years, basically through the pandemic, but everybody knows what it is. You know, my husband will say it's the old ICR building or it's the big brick building next to Walgreens. So it's an obvious building.
And I'm only just because we have a large audience.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time. And I actually went to your polling location during the primary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen that. I saw some of the other people here. It's a very active polling.
Yes.
A lot of people.
And people,
And so I think the space concerns. That's why I'm not saying we have to
Yeah.
or not. We haven't voted on that.
right,
But that is all the things you're describing. I mean,
Yeah.
they meet the need of the people. I think if you were inclined, Mr. McLean, I am definitely inclined. I think I heard you say you were inclined. We want to get them in the municipality where the voting in the municipality.
so a couple more things about the middle school that I'd like to point out.
And okay,
I'll be quick.
No, it's just the 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A lot of other things. I'll give you- it's 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, yes. So the middle school, we park in between the buses. It is and every year Garnet Valley says, we're gonna move the buses, you all can park here. And every year they don't. And we're promised they're gonna move the buses and they don't. So we park in between buses. It's a really inconvenient place and people don't feel safe. Last election, our fire marshal showed up and the gentleman is somewhat handicapped. And he parked in what was marked the handicap space at the Garnet Valley Middle School, which was actually for the fields on the complete other side of the parking lot. And that man walked 400 yards across, like he came into the lobby and he looked at me, he's like, where's the handicap parking? He was upset, he was embarrassed, and he was angry. He's also the fire marshal. He knows what's required of places. He had to sit down in the lobby before he could then walk the other 400 feet down the hallway because we're in the back corner of that building. The other complaint that I got from an older woman was that, yeah, there's bathrooms there, but they're built for 6th graders. She almost fell onto the toilet just trying to use the bathroom while she was voting.
hear you, and just, I think the concern about if we do not end up ultimately voting to move the location, about the accessibility issues, if you would also look into that as well, particularly if the buses are blocking. It sounds like there may be issues with blocking, spaces reserved for people with limitations. So we want to, but I'm not,
I understand.
Now, I do want to hear the other individuals.
Absolutely. The property manager is here if you have any questions specific to the property, the building, the handicapped accessibility.
How Mr. McGuinn feels about it. I don't want to negotiate.
I understand.
these from the-
No, it's not negotiating the lease. It's, is there handicapped accessibility? What's the ramp? How many bathrooms are there? Does it measure all of those things? The other thing is, in our 5-year lease, we will have 2 days every year where they'll shut down the first floor and Chester Heights gets to vote. And that's for at least the next 5 years. And the Chester Heights plan is to eventually build our own place, and then people can actually vote at the borough building, which we don't have.
If the property manager hasn't already connected with Ms. Dunn, I think that would be the important connection, because we will be looking to her I will be looking
Okay.
to her for recommendations.
I actually, they just did while I was spouting.
For attending and for being willing to use your touch bases.
It's actually our
Office. Are there any questions for me? I know I covered a lot of ground.
Any questions? No, I think that the gentleman.
Madam Chairwoman, I do have one from legal perspective, we could inquire about. There was a description of a series of conference rooms or rooms where different activities would take place, including the room where
I
somebody would
know
fill out a ballot.
that, yes.
My concern would be that the election board be, obviously, they're not looking over somebody's shoulder when they fill out a ballot, but they need to observe that somebody's not having someone else fill out their ballot, or wandering off of the ballot, and, so.
The rooms are connected.
Proper supervision based on the layout.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And I meant to actually say that to Jackie when you said it's just done. If you could also look at that flow. The election supervisors need to be able to readily, obviously, observe the vote so that no one's doing something impermissible as they go through the different rooms. You did describe it as different rooms.
They're connected. They're just a serpentine connected with double doors.
It's line of sight. And
Yes.
they staff the different rooms. So,
I will say that the minority and majority inspector said to the judge of elections last night, you're in this room, which is where they fill it out and scan, which is in the same room, connected to the room where they'll be filling in. And it's more like the openings, like it's very large. It's just, and then the flow.
Splitting the team, having worked polls many times, splitting the team is also potentially problematic. So I just want them to.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, the rooms are connected.
One question along those lines. So, if I'm with a campaign and I have a watcher there, can the watcher reasonably stay in one location and see
Yeah.
everything going on in all of those connected rooms?
Yes, the watcher would sit like on the far wall. So people would come in here, check in, get their ticket, and then hand their ticket in, and then they would be as far away as I am, and it would probably, yes, absolutely. I mean, it was an hour last night with the majority and minority inspector and the judge of elections standing there going, what about this, and how about this, and what about this, and what if this happens, and what about this? And I loved Bernie's emails last night because he was the most skeptical for sure. Like, I don't know if this is gonna work, I don't know. And he was the one coming in saying, I'm not sure. And he walked out of it saying, this is a great place. I love it. I'm really looking forward to having elections here. And that's why he wrote such an extensive email, because he wanted to make sure that he covered all of his own personal objections and the things that he was most concerned about. That's why his email was so long. And I did appreciate that he went into detail.
Any other questions?
Yeah, can you bring over the floor plan of this building? Do we have that?
I have, I was just,
I submitted and it's really
Sorry,
not.
if you speak, I'm gonna have to get your name.
Vincent Barbieri's, 420 Prospect Road, Springfield, PA 19064. I'm the associate broker for National America, who is the manager / owner of the building. The rooms are not connected; they're contiguous. To give you, I have a picture of it here, which I'm sending to Jackie. That's what we were talking about in the hallway. So and this was Bernie's idea last night as we were on site. So the location is 1,509 square feet total. And that's kind of, so it's more of a continuity. It's not really, you go to one room and then you open a door and go to another room. It's all openings, and it's kind of, you wind your way through. And again, when you have a lot of people at this particular location, like Jim had said, you're going to be able to have a nice, smooth transition of in here, out there,
and we probably have room for about 75 to 100 people standing outside. With a cold November rain, they won't get wet. I remember 2018, it was horrible.
No, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move to the next
Sorry.
one. Thank you very much for your presentation. And thank you, sir, for your assistance and for being here. The gentleman with the, I believe you asked to speak with the jacket, suit jacket right there next to Ms. Bristol. Oh, no, she's Ms. Bristol.
Good morning. I'm Marta Driscoll. I'm Councilwoman of Chester Heights, and I'm a member of the Garnet Valley Democratic Committee serving as the Vice Chair for Chester Heights. As a representative of both the community and the Democratic Party of Chester Heights, I'm here to voice our opposition to changing the polling location from an easily accessible and well-known public school building to a temporary private office space for the November 2022 election. First and foremost, I'd like to board to understand that I completely agree that we should move voting back to Chester Heights. I've heard this over and over again from our constituents. However, this is not the perfect polling place. We currently have an accessible location where residents have been voting for 4 years, and it is guaranteed and not at the whim of the rental market. On our council meeting on September 6th, Council issued a conditional approval for a standalone medical building to be built at the site next door to the building that is being proposed. When I asked the owner what he planned for the building that is currently 53 Baltimore Pike, he noted that he was in discussions to put in a WeWorks there to rent either the first or the third floor, which would lead me to believe that only the second floor, which would be the borough office, would be available for us to vote in. So when the new building's constructed, what does that mean for the safety of our voters? What is going to happen to parking when there's a medical building next door? How are we going to stop tenants who are going to be on the first floor from coming to work on election day and preventing everybody else to access the space? The mayor has mentioned many times that it is her goal for us to vote at the borough office. The borough office will be on the second floor. If you go ahead and proceed and approve this first floor location, which is what is before the board right now, what happens when that is no longer available and now the second floor space is available? Normally, when we move from inside one building, there's no presentation to the board. There's no Bureau of Elections reassessment of the space. It just happens. There's a building, it moves from one location to another. It's happened within the high school, it's happened within the middle school. And in this instance, it'll just move folks from the first floor to the second floor without your knowledge.
I don't think we would do that. We've had reviews where even schools would change from a cafeteria to another.
And that comes before the board.
It comes before us, and I think that there's even, I don't know Ms. Winterbottom, but there may even be notification. There is notification to voters even to change like that. I don't know. I've been to a lot of our voting precincts. I don't know any that are on second floor. I do want to say that I would be very disinclined to permit the required entrance into a building all the way up to another floor. But,
So when I first looked at the space, I was really concerned about the small location of just being in a conference room. And I think what I heard here today scares me even more. That is, we're going through corridors where I as a poll watcher cannot see everything that is happening. And to stand in this doorway to watch everything is going to be really, really inconvenient to those people who are voting. It's going to be intimidating for poll watchers to walk in there. We already have gauntlets that happen and occur.
You do, and I don't know that about my school. There are gauntlets. That background that you described, the mayor described as that one voter having to go to, is a total gauntlet to get to.
And exactly for that reason, this year, the Garnet Valley Middle School, because COVID restrictions have been lifted, is opening up another gym. So Concord 1 and Concord 2 we've been in discussions for them to move to the other gym. So now we have 2 gyms for all 3 polling locations, which would still allow people who've been voting at the middle school for 4 years to vote at that location. It is not 8 miles up the road. Actually, for me, voting at 53 Baltimore Pike personally takes 2 minutes off of my commute, and it makes me go across one of the most dangerous intersections on Valley Brook Road and Route 1. We just had an accident. We just had a member of our community tell us about, an accident in 2019 where she was T-boned and almost died at that very intersection. And the mayor had spoken to how many people are on that side of the road versus the other. So we have 2,300 voters in Chester Heights. About 400 of them are on the side of the 53 Baltimore Pike building, and on the other side of Route 1, we have the remaining 2/3 or more of our voters. Going to the Garnet Valley Middle School is a straight shot up Smith Bridge Road. Yes, we've been putting signs up there, but folks have been voting there now for 4 years. And I feel that changing the polling place, regardless of how well it's advertised, this close to an election, will confuse and alienate our voters. I don't think this is an immediate thing that we have to do for November 2022. I believe that if we want to bring voting back to Chester Heights, let's give ourselves some space to evaluate the location, and let's do it in 2023 when we have had plenty of time to tell people about the change, make sure the building's working, make sure that when we move our offices to the second floor, that is in the lease, that yes, we can use that first floor space forever for voting or for the next 5 years. Shifting people from one location to another is disenfranchising, and it's, I'd like to call it death by a thousand cuts, of voter suppression.
Mr. Driscoll, I don't know if you had a chance to see, I don't know the minority inspector. Is the minority inspector here?
He's not here, but I did read his note. I did read his email.
I think that Ms. Dunn, I know she will be looking, if we table this again, that is where I'm inclined right now, just at least until the next meeting to have a little bit more feedback. If you would be inclined to as one of the bipartisan, one of the not bipartisan members who has a voice in this, to review that and discuss with Ms. Dunn whether it alleviates any of your concerns that you've raised or not.
So I am scheduled to visit the space on Friday at 5 p.m.
Great.
I was hoping to visit it prior to a meeting with the board, but unfortunately I was not invited to the meeting on Monday.
You may get your chance if we table it, but let's see.
I do have a letter from Philip Block, who is also a committee member in Chester Heights, if I may.
Yes. And I do think that after these two speakers, I am going to ask Mr. Parks to assist me with 3 minutes just so that we can get through all of our issues today.
So from Mr. Philip Block at 357 Willits Way, and by the way, I'm 458A Lanai Road, Chester Heights. I'm writing to you with respect to the proposed location change for the polling location for the borough of Chester Heights. I'd like to register my disapproval of moving the polling location from its current location at Garnet Valley Middle School to the location of the open office space located in Baltimore Pike. I'm a long-term resident, previous candidate, and poll worker in Chester Heights. While I do not believe voting for municipal elections outside of my municipality is a desired situation and was not in favor of moving the polling to Garnet Valley Middle School in the first place, I believe the proposal under review of moving the polling place for general elections of 2022 is not warranted and will promulgate voter disenfranchisement at this time for the following reasons. The proposed polling location move is occurring within the same election cycle between the primary and general elections within this year. After many years of voting at St. Thomas Church, the polling place was moved to the Chester Heights Fire Company for 1 year. The following year, the polling location was moved to Garnet Valley Middle School, and now after 2 years, another location is being considered. I've personally observed significant voter confusion as to the location of the polling place by residents of the borough and have received many complaints about the various moves while campaigning last year. The proposed new polling location is going to be available for only 1 or 2 years until the building owner finds a new paying tenant, thus precipitating another polling location move in the very near future. This will be the 5th move in about as many years. As a result, the continual changing of polling locations will only serve to confuse and anger voters, resulting in the increase in voter disenfranchisement. I request that the polling location remain in place at the Garnet Valley Middle School until such time a more permanent location can be identified and established. Thank you for your consideration, Philip Block. I also have another letter from Jean Montgomery, who is also a committee member. I won't read that, but she notes that she was worried that it will confuse voters to change the location within 60 days of the election. And I have 23 signatures from residents of Chester Heights opposing the move.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
And where may I?
If you could hand those to Mr. Allen for consideration. Are you going to want to speak as well, sir?
I just want to say a couple.
All right, sorry, Ms. Driscoll, have you concluded?
Yes.
Thank you for your
very much
presentation.
thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So I'm Joe Camposano, and I represent the Garnet Valley Democratic Committee. And Chester Heights has been a part of our committee for the past, since the primary election this year. But even before that, I had a chance to observe their precinct in the Garnet Valley school district's middle school. You're familiar with it. It's a huge gymnasium. There's another gymnasium available. If that's not suitable, move it to the other gymnasium and not relocate the entire precinct. I think that's our concern as a committee. So I just want to make sure.
Thank you, Mr. Campusano. Did you say your address? Did I catch
Address?
it? Yeah. just for the record.
139 East Raynard Lane, Glen Mills.
Thank you. I want to say one more thing. Mr. I did visit that location. During election day, the board's job is to oversee. I go to a lot of sites and I did visit that one. Again, if it stays, there is a gauntlet concern. So if there's opportunity and it stays, I do think that creating a more open space for entry, the space is huge once you get into the gymnasium, as you probably know or your team knows. But getting to the far polling location does require walking down a hall where people do line up, and it can be, I would find it potentially intimidating. It's not intended to be, I think, but it could be just because it's such a thin hall. Okay, Mr. McBlain, do you have any questions or further comment? Mr. Alberts, do you have any questions or comment?
Not at this time.
Okay. I'm inclined to table this to give our team a chance to fully review the email of Mr. Miller.
One more comment.
Oh, there isn't. I'm sorry, Ms. Guiney.
My name is Colleen Guiney. I live at 337 Dickinson Avenue in Swarthmore. And just as a matter of public record, there's been multiple people talking about one poll watcher. And I know the board is aware of this, but just for public record, there are many elections where there are multiple candidates, and each candidate from each party is entitled to have a poll watcher at that time. So there could be as many as 3, 5, 7 poll watchers in a municipal election or an election with multiple candidates. So I just wanted that to be as part of the conversation and the evaluation of the new space. And I thank you all for your time.
No, thank you, Ms. Guiney. And Ms. Dunn, as part of the space consideration, you probably already didn't consider it, but the other people who may be present, not just the voters and the Board of Elections, but watchers as well. Thank you. I'm inclined to table it. I want to give our team a chance to really review that email. They haven't had a chance. I think Ms. Dunn has indicated a desire to do that. So I'd like to see if there's any motion to table it.
I'll make that motion.
Any second?
I'll second the motion. The motion is until the September meeting, correct?
Correct. The next meeting at the end of this month. So it's a short time frame. I hope if Ms. Dunn, that will be enough time for your team. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, the motion passes. Thank you, and thank you all for your time this morning. All right, with that, I think we turn to the long-anticipated Director of Elections report.
Good morning. You asked a moment ago for me to discuss precincts and the possibility of changing precincts. Currently, we have been and we continue to be under state law that forbids us from altering any precinct boundaries until after the 2022, November 2022 election. We are looking to consolidate what we call oh, that's right, we have sound now. Thank you. We are looking to consolidate what we have, some micro precincts, some very unusually small precincts. But we also want to take this opportunity, as reflected by Member McBlain's remarks, to look at some of the precincts that have seen rather significant growth over the last 10 to 20 years, especially those 5 or 6 precincts that have more than 2,000 voters in them, in Newtown Square and in Chester Heights. At the same time, we have to look at whether or not we're following census tracts, as well as not creating split precincts where we're having to have multiple ballot styles for MDJs or state reps or state senators or a combination, and then as well as the wards in the communities in the municipalities. So that's what we're working on right now with a member of our the county's staff who specializes in GIS, and we're looking to roll out some possible changes in the 2023 election cycle.
Well, I know I look forward to your recommendations on both of those categories, the micro precincts as well as the large anybody have any questions of Mr. Allen on that? Okay, then please continue.
Just wanted to remark briefly, there was a state conference of election officials in early August since our last meeting. Both Ms. Hagan and I attended that event. There was considerable debate over even the most minor, well, seemingly minor to the public, but major to election administrators, changes of a form. The form has since been introduced. It has not been widely used or distributed as far as I know, but the Department of State wanted to roll out a new form that combined voter registration and an application to vote by mail or vote absentee. There was strong pushback by election administrators because, just to give you an idea, the Federal Voting Assistance Program, if they're going to make even the slightest change to the military overseas application, they take a year to do that. They have months of discussion or public comment from election jurisdictions as well as users. And this was seemingly being pushed on us with less than 90 days to go. And eventually, the election administrators, myself included, prevailed to change the language, make it sure that it was in compliance with the law as far as what the attestations were. There was also considerable discussion on the next item.
I think, Mr. Allen, I understand that some people are using the form, but it's not been a high volume, and our team, the concerns that you had, at least we've been able to accommodate the new form?
The concerns we have here in Delaware County and in Montgomery County is that we have our voter registration and our vote by mail processing teams in two different offices. So that creates a paper chase where we need to preserve the original document with our voter registration department and then make a copy of it for safety's sake to get that over to Chester. It also raises the prospect of all kinds of unintended consequences. If we have a duplicate registration form, it's real easy to deal with and not alter the person's registration. However, then we have to take step 2 and determine whether or not that is a valid vote by mail or absentee application. Normally you have those processes in separation. Additionally, the SURE system does not have an easy way. They've come up with a way, but they did not have an easy way of scanning in a 2-page document, which this ended up being. Additionally, you have concerns with a vote by mail / voter registration form being used possibly and received by election jurisdictions between the 15th day before Election Day, when voter registration is supposed to cut off, and the 7th day before Election Day, when you can still apply for vote by mail or absentee. What do you do with the ones that arrive in between? So the state gave us guidance eventually, but it was not.
Well, I think those concerns were shared by most of the counties, right? But Mr.
Yes.
Allen, I understand that I think we have a great team, that they've done a good job of nonetheless implementing this successfully. Is that fair? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely, I would agree with that.
Thank you.
So also of considerable discussion was Act 88. This was the Election Integrity Grant Program. And this only surfaced and was approved by the legislature in late June. It's a grant program that allots funds to each county. It has several provisions in it. Among them is one of the next item on our agenda, which requires formal approval by the board before we can receive the grant funding. The grant funding is allotted based on registered voters in each county. Under the formula, Delaware County qualifies to receive a little over $2.1 million, $2,103,000 that it can apply to specific categories of expenses. But it also requires that we have what's called a continuous or ongoing count until all of the standard vote by mail ballots, excepting for provisional ballots that are, that need further evaluation, and excepting for military overseas ballots that can arrive up until the Monday or so after Election Day, Tuesday, processing of those. But all the vote by mail ballots have to be continuously counted all the way beyond midnight until sometime Wednesday, or if necessary, all through Wednesday and into Wednesday night or Thursday. So that was a consideration. However, at the end of the day, I strongly recommended to the county council that we apply for this funding, and also to my colleagues across the state who were on the fence about applying for this funding, simply because it is going to reduce the reliance on local taxpayer funds to pay for various items that are covered under the grant program, including the printing of the ballots, logic and accuracy testing, the payment for all of our poll workers on Election Day, as well as payment for canvassing and pre-canvassing work on Election Day, all activities after Election Day, and finally, among other categories, the processing of voter registration, new and changes that are ongoing up and before Election Day. So if you have any questions about that.
And did county council, I thought they took a vote last week on this issue. How did they vote?
They did vote in early August to, it was either late July or early August, to authorize me to apply for the funds, and then they voted again this past week to approve the acceptance of the grant funds.
And then for an action item for us, you're presenting to us, how are you presenting that action item?
The next item before you is part of Act 88 is we need to perform a review of registration, mail ballot, pre-canvass, and canvassing laws so that we're going through and examining whether we're indeed in compliance with all of these items, and we have to certify under Act 88 to the state that we have performed this review. This past Friday, Ms. Winterbottom and Ms. Hagan and I were on a long Teams meeting. I think it went about 2 hours. And we went through all of the different statutes that this document references, and indeed found that we were in compliance. There was one very minor area where it has us, under the statute, marking documents approved, and we do not do that. However, we do when we're processing, because we think this statute was before the SURE system. It predates the SURE system being in place, as this statute references, I believe, only absentee ballots. And instead of marking the ballots approved, they're actually processed and indicated approved electronically through the SURE system. And as a result of that, the list of approved applications are available to any person, any registered voter who requests the list, as well as the political parties and campaigns. So there's no mystery as far as what has been approved and has not been approved. So that was
Madam Chair, Mr. Allen and I discussed that issue, and my determination is that the process of the electronic documentation of the approval satisfies the marking requirement, even though there's not a piece of paper with a stamp put on it.
Thank you.
Ask the board members at this time if you could please make a motion to approve the compliance certification for the Department of State that the staff has performed the review of registration, mail ballot, pre-canvass, and canvassing laws.
Okay. I want to give the board members an opportunity to ask any questions both about the Act 88 item or the compliance review, but before we do that, should we have a motion to approve the compliance election integrity report?
So moved. A second.
Okay, so now for discussion, do either of you, let's start with Mr. McBlain, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I know I've had the opportunity to go thoroughly through this with Mr. Allen, and I'm satisfied that they've taken all the steps necessary, and I'm in agreement regarding the application and acceptance of the grant. So I'm satisfied.
Thank you. Mr. Alberts?
Yeah, I'm as satisfied as Mr. Blaine. Similarly, I've had conversations with Mr. Allen and feel very confident.
Great. Because this is an action item, I believe, Mr. Solicitor, we do need to have public comment. If anybody would like to comment on this item, please come forward now. Okay. Oh, sorry. And the sound system now works, so you don't have to.
don't have the
You don't, you can if you, but-
Well, I just want to make sure that there's an audit for the funds, like where's the money going? I
I'm sorry,
understand.
can you just say your name and your address?
I'm Kathy Buckley, I'm from Edgemont Township, and I was just wondering where the money goes. There's a lot of money going here from these grants and everything. Where does it go? We got a lot of money for the mailboxes, or whatever you want to call them, drop-by mail. And where does the money go? Does anyone audit where this money's going? Because it's a lot of money floating around. Where does it go? Taxpayers are paying for it endlessly, and it's not free money from the state. We're actually paying the state to give you the money. So where's the audit? That's
No, thank you. I will have Mr. Allen, to the extent it hasn't been fully presented yet. I think we've talked about this a couple times, but I think this is a good time now. We're about to implement this. If you wouldn't mind responding, I'd appreciate it.
We're responsible for reporting at the end of this period. So the period that this covers is from June, it's under the state's budget cycle, so it's not under the county's budget cycle. So it goes back to June 30th, July 1st of this year through June 30th of 2023. So we're required to account for each dime, each penny of the funding and how it's used, just as we are with the Help America Vote Act, security grants, just as we are with any other grants. So there is requirements for documentation of every expense. We have, for example, voter registration currently checking off how many hours of each staff member's time is being used to process voter registrations, as opposed to doing other clerical work for that kind of thing. So
don't they get paid regardless?
they get paid through the
So
they get paid through the
you're just applying
county.
the funds to it, but they get paid regardless.
They get paid regardless,
So
but
it-
we can use
okay.
the state money to offset that expense and possibly use funding for other purposes as well.
Well, my question is.
I don't want to turn this
Okay.
into a Q&A
No.
of him, but did
Yes,
you have any other
to you.
questions?
The mail-in ballots, what was the expense for that? How much does it cost us? Where did the money go? Because I know we
There
got a
are-
lot of money from different organizations to put them in place. Where did all the money go? You know, it's been a year. It's been more than a year. It's been 2 years. Where did all that money go? I just want to know, I hope an accounting of where all the money went.
We can provide you that. That's a
Okay.
separate program entirely from 2 years ago, but we can certainly provide you with, the grant
I don't want to
funding.
get off, because
Yeah.
it is a separate program, we're focused on Act 88. And
Okay.
I understand from.
Well,
Mr.
I just want to
right,
make
no,
sure there's a provision that every penny is calculated, and it's not just going to, like, broken machines and all this stuff that, I don't even know why we have the machines, because they keep breaking, and no one seems to be able to keep track of the V drives, so,
We
I mean,
have the
why do we even
machines
have them?
because Pennsylvania law requires us to use that kind of a system.
Not 2 years ago they didn't, but anyway,
It
that's
did,
another story.
actually.
They did. Okay, do you have any other comments?
No.
Thank you.
Hello, Louis Troffer, 901 Powder Mill Lane, Wynwood. It's a question for Mr. Parks. With the Act 88, you were talking about the review and certification. I don't know the answer to this, so it's going to be an easy one, I think. Are the various codes and statutes and requirements that you're certifying, is that contained in the Act, or is that from some separate document?
The act refers to different sections of the election code.
So I'm sorry, so they're enumerated in the Act itself, correct? That was it.
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I don't know this. So the fund is going to be Pennsylvania or federal tax money that's going to be funding this grant? I'm not clear on that. It seems like a Pennsylvania act, but it's federal money or Pennsylvania taxpayer
No,
money?
I understood it to be the state.
No, it's
State, okay, thank you.
Commonwealth.
Got it.
Any other comments on Act 88? There will be other opportunities, we just.
It's just related to his presentation, so is that all under Act 88?
Well,
or
let's hear it and we
Yeah,
can-
that's
okay.
what I mean, you can
Okay.
tell me whether it's included or not. So Joanne Turillo, Rock Hill Road, Edgemont Township. I just had a question just to educate myself about something Mr. Allen mentioned with the dual voter registration / mail-in ballot request form. Is that something that's currently in place?
Not currently, but
Okay.
if you all, we could just allow it for this moment if we want to. Otherwise, is it going to be a long question?
No, and then the second part of that was, he had mentioned that there is a discrepancy between one being due 15 days before the election versus 1 and 7, and how was that resolved?
Why don't we come back to that and just take the vote, because it's just, we have an open motion right now, and we'll provide an opportunity. I'll make sure you have a chance to ask him about that,
Okay, all right,
to
thank
further
you.
illuminate. Any other questions about Act 88?
Good morning. Joy Schwartz, 514 Lombardi Road, Drexel Hill. I also have a question regarding Act 88 and the use of the funds. We had actually spoken before about this grant under Act 88 and made requests for the use of some of those monies to perhaps be used for better surveillance of the drop boxes, which of course I would love to get rid of, but they're there. So would it be possible to spend some of that money on live stream of the drop boxes, put it at an angle where you could actually see what's being put inside the drop boxes, and that the public can actually watch? And so that's one question I have. Second question about the funds is whether those funds are going to be used to purchase any more drop boxes, because I saw on the website just on the 9th that the county is saying that they are going to be having over 3 dozen drop boxes, but I don't know if that means, 37, 38, 50, 70, 100. So if you could clarify that, that would be great.
I'm going to try to be straightforward. Jim, correct, Mr. Allen, correct me if I'm wrong. The answer to the first is yes, that the money, I believe, can be used on surveillance equipment. Is that, or surveillance activities, security activities?
Oh, I know it can. I just wonder if it will.
And he's going to, Mr. Allen's going to present later in the agenda on 6 items related to the drop boxes.
Thank you.
And we'll include, it's actually on the agenda as other camera preparation, some discussion of the camera. So I think that would be a good opportunity. But I think the answer to your second question was no, but
Yeah, security and transparency are eligible expenses. Additional drop boxes are absolutely not eligible
That's not happening?
expenses, and
Okay.
that's not happening.
and in fact, I think our agenda items include actually removing 2
Reducing.
drop boxes. not
Okay,
increasing
well,
the
that's
number.
good news. Thank you, I appreciate that. I do have one more question about the use of the Act 88 funds. And I've expressed this before in council meetings that, right now, we have a gravy train of money coming from the state that we were not counting on. So I understand this is sort of a little icing on the cake here that the county can use. But my question is, or my comment is that I hope that we won't be tying up the taxpayers in the future when those funds are not going to be forthcoming from the state. And by making investments into machinery and things that maybe we can afford this year, but that going forward would be a great burden on the taxpayers. So that's the end of my comment right now. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or Act 88 public comment? Otherwise, I'm going to close the public comment period. And then we have the motion already moved and seconded to complete the county election integrity compliance report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. With that, Mr. Allen, I believe we can move to the next item, which is item 4E, Act 66.
Briefly, the legislature had a woefully inadequate law in the past regarding the orders of the quantities of ballots that we should order for each precinct on Election Day. We took steps to exceed greatly the number of ballots so that we were prepared for this election, for example, to have coverage for up to 85% in-person turnout, barring any use of vote by mail. The legislature went to the other extreme this summer and said for a general election in November, you should order for 100% of less how many have applied for vote by mail ballots. So in essence, we're going to have to up the contract, and we received approval from the county council. It's going to shift our numbers from ordering enough for 85% in-person turnout to approximately 94%. We will try to tweak those numbers downward as we get more applications to vote by mail. The latest report from yesterday from Ms. Copeland indicated that we currently have approximately 42,000 applications.
And Mr. Allen, is that an action item that you would like us to vote on, to approve?
It's an
the
information
additional-
item only.
Thank you. Then please proceed with the next. I'm sorry, any questions from the board members about the ballot order? Okay, please proceed.
So for the 2022 general election, we're currently transitioning all of our equipment, our ballot design of completion, as well as our testing. We'll be performing the military overseas ballots, sending those out on or before September 24th, which is a Saturday. We typically try to get those out, if possible, the Friday before. That's a federal deadline. And at the same time, we're working to build up the files so that we're able to provide sample ballots. This is a slightly smaller mailing, or ballot rather, than the municipal cycle, for example. The projected first mailings of the ballots, right now we're targeting on or about October 5th. Knock on wood, everything goes well with testing. We still have more testing to perform with our vendor, Fort Orange Press, on the mail-in ballots. There is a special election that's being tacked on to the ballots, but it only affects 4 precincts. It's in Haverford Township. The first ward commissioner resigned, and Stephen D'Amelio, and that created a vacancy. We have nominations, I'm informed by Ms. Hagan, from both the Democratic and Republican parties thus far to be on that ballot position. Again, that's only for the 4 precincts in Haverford First Ward. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions, other questions for Mr. Allen? Right, then let's turn to the solicitor's report. Mr. Parks?
Thank you. A couple of quick items here. First, earlier in the past week, I circulated to the members of the board a copy of a complaint that has been filed against the Secretary of the Commonwealth and every Board of Elections in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania regarding the practice of curing mail-in and absentee ballots. The allegation in that complaint is certain counties permit certain types of curing activities that the plaintiffs in that case believe are improper, and the plaintiffs are looking for a consistent rule across the Commonwealth on that. Delaware County is not, although we've been named as a defendant, as have all counties in the Commonwealth, there are no allegations that Delaware County permits any improper curing, and indeed we follow the directive of the Secretary of the Commonwealth with respect to handling mail-in and absentee ballots. And so that case will presumably be going forward. The second item just relates to record retention, and it's more of an FYI. The period for retaining records after elections is 22 months under federal law, shorter period for certain types of records under state law. We are now past that 22-month retention period for the November 2020 general election, which is a matter of obvious interest to the public based on the number of record requests we've been receiving over the past several months. And I just wanted to report that records related to the November 2020 election, although due for disposal, are subject to a litigation hold because one piece of litigation that continues to sort of wind its way through the upper echelons of the Pennsylvania courts. So until that matter is disposed of, those records will be subject to a litigation hold.
Thank you. Any questions for the solicitor? All right, then I believe we're going to have a report on dropout status. Is that you, Mr. Allen?
we move to that, just a reminder to the chairwoman that although the consideration of
I
minutes
know, I
was
didn't move to actually approve the
added
minutes.
to the
It's
meeting
there. Thank you.
agenda,
I mean, you know what, why don't we do that right now? Did everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes that were circulated? Okay, does anybody have any suggested changes or edits to those minutes?
Just a motion to approve.
Okay, then, is that so moved?
So moved.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. All right, Mr. Allen, I believe, are you presenting on the Dropbox status?
Yes, and I want to recognize Ms. Siobhan Flores, who helps coordinate this activity. We both inherited quite an extensive network of more than 40 initially. So we may be whittling this down. We will be whittling this down a little bit. First off, Upper Chichester, the township voted to cancel the agreement. We removed the Dropbox. We're still in the process of removing the related camera, pole, electrical, and relay system that's still on site. In Media Borough, at the Borough Hall, we've had ongoing issues with the camera and the solar panel and its ability to function well. And quite honestly, with a Dropbox here at the government center just 3 blocks away, I cannot for the life of me justify continuing to expend funds to keep that Dropbox open. We approached Media Borough and said, this is our intention, speak now or forever hold your peace. They understood the logic behind our request and they understand the removal. We have a 24/7 Dropbox here at the government center, and I would request a motion so that the Board of Elections, in this case, would initiate the cancellation of the agreement forged in 2020 that placed the Dropbox at the Media Borough Hall.
Okay, before we discuss anybody move to, consistent with Mr. Allen's request?
I have a couple questions.
We can discuss, all right, we can discuss it for, I was going to just have the motion on the
I'll make
table.
the motion then debate, yeah.
Would you like to make that?
There you go, so moved.
All right, now, I do want to say one thing, and then just only that, I just want to clarify for the record that I think you've said it implicitly, but that there's actually still will be a Dropbox in media. It's 3 blocks away from the other Dropbox. In fact, they had 2 because there's one at the government center. So the media, which is not indicate, I don't believe, a disinclination to have any Dropbox within the boundaries, will still have one. It's just the location, and will be one.
Also, I would add, as we discuss all of these drop boxes, as a reminder to the voting public that any voter in Delaware who's registered in Delaware County may use any Delaware County drop box. So if one is removed from a community, that doesn't stop the individual from going to the drop box in the neighboring community or even across the county if they're running errands there, or coming to the government center.
Thank you. That's important because of the Upper Chichester removal. Thank you. Mr. Alberts, do you have questions?
Yeah, the first question, I have a couple questions. One, I imagine it's possible to recite the boxes that we removed from one location if we identify alternate locations that might better serve the population of the county?
That is possible. I would not recommend pursuing such an action less than 60 days before an election, which is where we are now.
Certainly. And then the Upper Chichester case, what was the reason given? Why did they want their box removed? And what is the consequence of breaking the contract?
There is no consequence to breaking the contract. The Township Council voted to remove the action. It's really irrelevant for me to know what the motivations were. Perhaps they didn't like the looks of the solar panel. I don't know. It's none of my business, so I didn't probe any further when they took the action. I took it at face value, and we began to remove the drop box from that site.
And I guess consistent with that, Mr. Solicitor, I assume there's a termination of the contract provision in the contract itself.
There is.
And did they properly execute under that provision?
I have not studied that issue, but I'm sure Mr. Allen would have brought it to my attention if there were concerns about that. It's sort of an at-will type termination.
Right.
They notified us by certified mail, and that was a couple of months ago. and we responded almost immediately to confirm receipt and to confirm that we would be taking appropriate action.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that these drop boxes provide an important service to voters in the county, and I want to make sure that voters in every part of the county are able to access these services. So I guess I'll take a look at some of the other locations, and we can discuss maybe further how we can expand and maybe expand the program, resolve some of these gaps in accessibility, whatever we can to make sure that voters have access to the drop boxes. That's a priority for me personally, so that's all.
Thank you. Mr. McBlain? Oh, sorry, you?
Oh, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Well, I have no objection to the removal of the drop boxes. I think in general, and again, it's not to get into some of the larger national issues, but just from, as I've made comments before, from an election administration management perspective, we have too many drop boxes. We have I think the most drop boxes in the state. So you just have to look at it as you have more, how are you going to manage them? Remember when on election night at 8 o'clock, we have what, about 40 drop boxes at this point in time?
Yes, we do.
Give or take one or two?
Yeah, approximately.
You
I
have
think
to
we may
find
end up with
40
39
different
or something like that.
individuals to lock the drop boxes at 8 o'clock. And then we have different sets of folks that go around and pick up the materials from the drop boxes. And some of that is done in the wee hours of the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's where I get, although I have confidence that, there has, been no shenanigans, certainly in regards to our employees, who's always mindful of the appearance, to the public of what occurs. There's been situations where a drop box was omitted to have been picked up. Again, not through any intentional or any kind of election shenanigans. It's just that as you grow the system, as it gets bigger and bigger, it just provides, and humans are part of it, it just provides a possibility for a mistake. So I think if you're talking about replacing or expanding, all those types of questions, have to be answered. And I do have other comments on the camera part, but I'll
You let him talk
defer,
about that first. Okay.
certainly let Mr. Allen give his report first.
Well, right now, we are not talking about expanding. We're talking about whether or not we are on agreement or not on the motion to remove the second media drop box, the one that's not located at the government center. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, so I'm sorry. Oh, you're right. Thank you. Does anybody have any comment on that? Yes, please. I'm sorry. Thank you. Absolutely.
I really appreciate the idea that some of the townships are eliminating their drop boxes. Unfortunately, the drop boxes are opportunity for voters, but they're also opportunity for mules. And mules are people that stuff drop boxes. Recently, a video came out on Chester County, our neighbor county, that actually showed from the town's video cameras that are on the drop boxes an incredible amount of ballot stuffing. And so I think that any number of drop boxes is too many, and that we need to get rid of them. There are mailboxes on the corner. The mail-in ballots can be mailed from the post office very easily. The post office scans every piece of mail that comes in, and it's a much more secure system. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ruther.
I was going to save my comments for the end, but you gave me an opportunity. I just, first of all, would like to thank everybody up there for your service. I don't think a lot of people realize that you serve without compensation. This is a volunteer activity to further access and legal compliance. And as a member of county government, I'm very appreciative of that. That doesn't go for you, Mr. Allen. You get paid. But I did have a couple of comments regarding drop boxes. First, if people want to put this in context, why we have so many, the drop boxes were installed in 2020 in the immediate aftermath of the first change in majority party control in this county since 1875. And there was a real concern on the part of council members. I was not one of them. I would have gone with a smaller number, but of a majority of the members of council that we would be picking winners and losers. There are still democratically controlled towns, there are Republican controlled towns. And remember, this was early in 2020, and when we had yet to have a certain political figure disparaging vote by mail. And it was with the onset, especially with the onset of the pandemic, the drop boxes were really viewed as a way for people to facilitate voting safer. And, we were already identifying, and in Delaware County, had many pockets of our community where mail service has been very poor. I mean, it's one of the consistent complaints that I was getting well before the issues over the 2020 election, that there are neighborhoods, and in diverse areas. I'm talking Ridley Park, I'm talking, Chester, I'm talking parts of Haverford Township, where people were not getting their mail, for 7 days, for a week at a time, and then they'd get a big drop because somebody would go on vacation and they wouldn't be replaced. So the drop boxes were really seen as something that was going to be useful, and we did not, on council, want to pick winners and losers in terms of who was going to get those drop boxes. And there's real questions. Do you do it based on how many cars there are? Do you do it based on how many post office or post boxes there are? I mean, how do you make that decision? So the easy answer was to offer them to every municipality, and we put them in the places where every municipality wanted them. And that was not an attempt to, and we did it with non-taxpayer dollars, that it was an opportunity to build some long-term infrastructure, because at the time, again, not realizing that there was going to be a full-on assault on the validity of mail-in votes. It seemed like a good expenditure of dollars. I can tell you, if you go to places where they've been voting for a long time by mail, there's drop boxes everywhere. They're in shopping centers, they're at post offices, they're at libraries, they're everywhere. So that's one thing.
I do, Ms. Rizzo, I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to add on to what you said. I think even before that, if people remember, in the primary, we had drop boxes at the polling locations, again, in the height of the pandemic, to try to create a safe opportunity.
For people to just...
And they were heavily used.
They were heavily utilized.
And after that, you create the infrastructure opportunity.
Right, but the decision to create that infrastructure had to be made well before, because of the lead time, and it was made before we understood there was going to be a partisan divide. A couple of other things regarding Upper Chi. An alternate location in Upper Chichester has been identified. There is a property owner with a very publicly visible property that is often used for public events who is willing to host a drop box, but I understand the rationale for not doing it before 60 days before an election. But I will be reaching out to Mr. Allen and asking that we address a possibility of reinstalling a drop box in that municipality for 2023 and going forward. Again, assuming the paperwork and stuff all gets approved. And some reminders about the drop boxes. I think it's important for everybody to know that only the voter or a person with the necessary paperwork identifying them as an agent of a disabled voter who can't get to the drop box can use the drop boxes. I would ask this board or the solicitor and the election staff to provide some clarification about how somebody who has that paperwork and intends to use a drop box rather than dropping here at the county makes it clear. Like, do you wrap that paperwork around and use tape it together around the ballot so when you drop it in, it's clear that you were authorized to do it? Like, how do you do that? Because it's not clear, and I do know that there has been talk of people staking out drop boxes and looking for people violating the law, and I think that somebody who is in fact complying with the law should be able to make that clear and not be accosted by people or risk being called by the DA's office because they followed the rules. Second, I would note that there is no limit on how many ballots you can drop if you drop them at a unsurveilled mailbox or a post office. You can walk into a post office with a tray of mail-in ballots that you collected at an event, and you can drop them off at the post office for mailing, and that is not illegal under Pennsylvania law. That is not considered harvesting. It is legal. So I think the focus on drop boxes as being a place for mules is ridiculous. If you're going to assault the ability to do mail-in ballots at all, I get that, but the focus on drop boxes as being a problem. They really are a solution, especially in those areas where we have documented evidence of lack of on-time mail delivery or pickup. or where we've got evidence that mailboxes themselves have been tampered with. I don't think you can go a month in the Delco Times without reading about somebody who's doing phishing in mailboxes. There have been far more mailboxes that have been ripped off than there have been drop boxes. And that's just in the last year. And finally, this is a question for Mr. Allen, again, to clarify. Because mailboxes are available and are a safe way to return, and because people can always drop at the county, I don't believe there's any, I've not seen anything providing for satellite offices for this election, but you can always drop at the county voter services offices here. My understanding is that the drop boxes themselves would only be open the last 2 weeks before the election. That's correct?
That is true. So whether we mail the first batches on October 5th, 6th, 12th, what have you, the only drop box that will be open initially will be the one on the first floor, or the ground floor, I should say, of the government center, right across from the security desk at the with the magnetometers. So people don't have to go through the magnetometers; they could use the drop box right there. Then on the 24th, 15 days before Election Day, we will open all of the other drop boxes. That's been practiced in past elections as well.
Yeah, and I honestly said I support that, because I think the real advantage of the Dropbox is for people who are insecure about their ability to determine whether their ballot has been received in time to remedy that situation. And I'm a little bit out of turn here, but I do have to leave, so I have one quick other thing in response to the solicitor's report.
We will indulge you on that, Ms.
I appreciate that. Thank you. In connection with the lawsuit, I know that we have not made great efforts to cure ballots, but I do believe that we have canceled ballots or notified that the ballot has been received and canceled if we determine early on that there is a problem with that ballot. There is a lawsuit that is winding its way through the Pennsylvania courts and has been cited that says that you cannot vote provisionally because the statement you have, if you have submitted a ballot and it's been canceled. So when we think about not allowing people to cure or the significance of that lawsuit, we ought to be aware that there are people out there who are simultaneously saying you shouldn't be allowed to cure and the county should not be allowed to cancel the ballot that's been received well in time but is not capable of being read for, counted, say they didn't sign it, or it turns out that we've determined by weighing it through the Blue Crest machine that it does not contain a privacy envelope. If those things happen, that person, because of a clerical error, is being disenfranchised. If the same case that I'm referring to is successful in saying that if you've submitted a ballot, even though it can't be counted, that you cannot vote provisionally. So I just ask this board and to keep that in mind as you determine and instruct your solicitor on how to proceed in these future cases. Nobody, whether it's, I don't care how they're registered to vote or who they are, should be deprived of the opportunity to cast a ballot provisionally and to have that provisional ballot counted if no other ballot from that person was counted, because they found out that while the ballot was received, it cannot be counted, even if they're not being given an opportunity or a reason to cure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would only add in response to the remarks of the previous two speakers that the clearest chain of custody does not involve incorporating the U.S. Postal Service. It goes directly from the voter to the election authority. It's actually a shorter chain of custody than the distance between the voter going to the polling place, casting it there, then it has to be delivered to a drop-off site, and then from the drop-off site to the election authority. Secondly, in terms of using the Postal Service, I'm a big believer in the Postal Service. They've come a long way over the last 20 years. I've been involved in mailings of millions of pieces to canvass voters, to various other roles. But in the week before Election Day, I always, if voters ask or if we're putting it in a news release, we encourage people to use the drop box and not the mail, because as Ms. Flores can tell you, she's nodding her head as I speak, we've had far too many instances. It makes all of our staff uncomfortable to see a letter that's clearly dated and postmarked on or before Election Day that arrives 3 days, 4 days, a week, even a month after Election Day. And it's painful to see that because that voter clearly did their job, mailed it on time, but it didn't get to us. So that's all I would add.
And I imagine we will all be looking, I know I will be closely at that October 5th date and trying, I know you're going to try to hold as tight as you can before you the next comment, to getting those out in the mail so that so voters can have the opportunity to review their mail-in ballot with as much time as possible to still, if they choose to return it by post service, have it arrive on time. Mr. Solicitor, there was a comment made by Councilwoman Ruther about potential interference with individuals dropping off mail-in ballots, and I thought maybe if you would, just a moment, let me tell you my view, and you can help me understand it. If someone interferes with someone dropping off their mail-in ballot, I would consider that voter interference and illegal.
That is correct. There are generally applicable laws at the federal and state level that provide for stern, including criminal penalties for trying to disenfranchise or prevent people otherwise lawfully voting from voting.
And because the person who may have a concern about somebody bringing more than one ballot to the drop box impermissibly has the opportunity to have both surveillance cameras, and we've taken very seriously and made every referral to the DA's office when something's been presented to us. There are non-interfering ways, I believe, that they can avail themselves of the potential to have that investigated. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Any other comments on what we've discussed so far?
No, Madam Chair, but I apologize, I have to excuse myself for just a couple of minutes. Obviously, our meeting's running a little bit late. I just have to take care of something that's due at 11 o'clock,
Okay, I think we still have a quorum for the moment.
I don't have any objection to proceeding. I just, hopefully I've just done in a few minutes.
Okay, any concerns? Nope. Okay, then thank you. All right, please proceed with public comment.
Again, Kathy Buckley, Edgemont. My concern is the mailbox in general. They're not secure. Why don't you just go in person? I understand there's some people that have handicaps and everything. They can do it by mail or a drop box. Have it at the county one, that everyone who ever has a problem can drop at one that is secure and everything. Why wouldn't someone coming in person have precedent over someone that has a ballot that supposedly came in the mail? Because I know from the 2020, 2 individuals that happened to. And I was told by Ms. Ruthers that everyone was investigated and they did make a report. That's incorrect. I talked to both people and they have never been contacted. They went in person, someone filled out a ballot for them, and they came in person with ID, and they were not allowed to vote. They had to do a provisional. So there is problems with these drop boxes, and I don't understand. They were there for COVID. Well, we've gotten a handle on COVID. You're allowed to go grocery shopping, you can get gas, you can go to work and everything. Why can't we vote? I mean, we voted during the war. We can vote during this. Drop boxes are not needed.
Okay, and have you completed your comment? I just want to say, if there are concerns, Ms. Buckley, that there have been unfollowed up potential allegations of criminal activity, I would appreciate if you would have the individuals who are witness to that reassert those through our election site. There's an email, because that's something we take very seriously.
I'm still waiting for my case to be handled. It's been 4 months, and I went to the DA.
I thought you said that a referral hadn't been made. If a referral's been made, I'm not going to comment on that.
But I'm just saying, the process here, how is it handled? That is a concern, because we are expecting a safe, secure, and there's no method of handling this stuff.
There is a method for handling it. When these issues are raised, I refer them to the DA's office. I've said that many, well, the DA's job is to investigate criminal wrongdoing.
Right.
So we're going to let the DA do the DA's job.
What if he doesn't? Because it's been 4 months. And it's not hard to watch cameras and follow. Okay, just all right, I'll skip.
We're not going to comment on, I was concerned that you had said a referral hadn't been made. And if that was true, then I want to make sure it's made. We take that very seriously. Everyone here does.
There's 2 outstanding.
Well, if there's outstanding, though, meaning that they're under investigation, we can't comment on it all. Thank you.
I would like to just say something.
Yes, Mr.
Briefly on that. Just uncharacteristically maybe, jumping in to defend the district attorney's office, just because a result has not been achieved that someone desires does not mean they have not done their job. Investigations are investigations, and investigations might lead to something that you think needs to happen, and they might not. But investigations are investigations, and they are not convictions, they are not certainties, they are investigations. And I think we need to respect that process too. Law enforcement has a job to do, the courts have a job to do, and people have rights, and people have the burden of proof if they want to make an accusation that wrongdoing has happened. And that's one of the reasons why we usually refrain from commenting on these things. But I think it's important to say that out loud, that just because you've made an allegation does not mean you're entitled to a conviction.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez.
Before we proceed, I would just advise that the motion on which we're
I know, but
receiving public comment is the motion to remove the Dropbox and media.
We have gotten a little astray, thank you. And I don't know if it was the indulgence of Councilwoman Ruther that allowed it, but let's get back on track. I hope, sir, and I do want to, I think we started to vote, Mr. Parks, before the public comment, so when Mr. McBlain returns, let's take that vote again. Yeah, thank you. So are you here to comment about the motion?
I think I am.
Okay, good, all right.
Scott O'Donnell, 120 Clearwater Drive, Media, Pennsylvania. I, like Mr. Allen and like the rest of you, I'm just tired of hearing about election fraud. I'm just tired of it. It's been going on. 2016, we had allegations. There was, thing. 2020, then they make a movie about it. Somebody just referenced in Chester County, people stuffing ballot boxes. I don't want anyone to go to jail for making a mistake or for doing something wrong. The previous woman that was up here said that there's no law against mailing multiple ballots, and I think that's the solution here. I think this idea with us putting ballot boxes out there, I know we've got, I think, 42 out there. I don't know if we're going to add more. We're talking about removing one. I support removing them all. Again, I don't want anybody breaking the law, and it sounds to me like if I take 2 ballots to a ballot box, my wife and mine, and stick them into a ballot box, I'm breaking the law. But if I take them to the post office and I mail them both, I'm not. I would really like it so that we don't have to go through this in 2023 saying, wait, there was an election fraud again, that we really give serious consideration to just doing away with these ballot boxes because they seem to be causing more harm than good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment on the current, just perfect timing. Any other public comment on the open motion, which we started to vote on, but we need to complete public comment, to remove by the board motion the second Dropbox and media? Okay, then all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. Mr. Allen, I believe there's additional reports on Dropboxes.
Briefly, we're working to resolve the camera issues still at Marple. That's at the Marple Library. And then in Millbourne had some construction at their municipal building, which displaced the Dropbox. They are trying to get together with us and relocate it on the same property. So we gave them a deadline of September 15th, and they did get back in touch with Ms. Flores. And so we're trying to get that reestablished. Aston is kind of on the fence right now. We're at a site, a building that they are soon no longer going to be using. So Aston Township government has moved to a new building. I believe the firefighters are still at the old building, but soon that's not going to be the case. So we're in discussions with them on whether we would move it to the community center. And meantime, Mr. Rob Wright has been performing other tests of the cameras to make sure that they're all recording. And secondly, to address some of the questions that came up before, we did not have the capacity to get any kind of long-term storage of the videos. They're not required. They're not election records per se. However, we do believe we should have that storage capacity. The download cost was exorbitant, and even then you could only access about 2 hours of one Dropbox video at a time. It was impractical. So Mr. Wright has worked to develop a solution where we're going to have dedicated computers basically PCs that are going to each record of 6 drop boxes, and we're going to have that stored so that it can be retrieved and provided to the public as needed. And we're also having the storage capacity in-house so that we're not going to rely on a third-party vendor for storage and retrieval of that material. That's all I have on this topic.
Any questions for Mr. Allen about the Dropbox status generally?
I'd like to make a couple comments, Mr.
Absolutely.
Chair. I want to thank Mr. Allen and Mr. Wright and the board members who we've discussed this before to implement this system of recording. I believe that this is important. I've made the public comments before that in the past, and we continue on our website to say, hey, these drop boxes are monitored 24/7. And I'm not sure that was completely accurate before, because although they are there's a camera and it provides a feedback to the park police, it's not always monitored. It's in conjunction with all of the other cameras that the park police have to monitor throughout all the other county buildings and parks. So I did believe it was important to record it, and I think they've come up with a cost-effective and practical solution to it, so that if there is a question regarding whether or not there's an abuse of Dropbox or a violation of the law, the answer is, hey, we can go back and take a look. I think we do look, and I think other party leaders look, members of the board look, we get reports, and I do take a look at these that look at, how many ballots were delivered to a Dropbox or a certain place. And for myself, I look to see are there red flags. I live in Alden. I know how many people are in precincts in Alden. If I were to see that there were 300, ballots dropped in Alden, I'd say, wait a second, that might be a red flag. And I haven't had that experience so far in my time on the board, about a year now. Although, I have not seen any problems, with the system, other than, as I talked about, the administration. There's just a lot of them, and they're difficult to administer. I do believe, though, it is important for the public to know that there is a mechanism in place in case somebody does suspect that there's a problem, to go back and take a look at it. So it is one more step to providing confidence that our elections are free and fair. So those are my comments.
All right, I think now, if there's no other comment from the board or the solicitor or Mr. Allen, I think we are now back to you, Ms. Dunn. It's been a long morning since you last spoke. I think these will require less comment, I'm sure.
I hope so. Okay, on the agenda is Chester City 1-4-2-1, currently located at Chester Gateway Senior Apartments, located at 111 Avenue of the States in Chester. There were concerns from the party leader and the judge of election that the size of the current location is going to be too small for the general election. That precinct has a high volume of ADA requirements, which means 2 cages. So it's like having 2 cages per precinct, and there's 2 precincts, so they have 2 of everything, so they were concerned about the size. So I'm making a recommendation to move the location to move Chester City 1-4-2-1 to the Palmer House Apartments, located at 1420 Estuary Street in Chester. The survey has been done and meets the ADA requirements and does appear that will be significant size. So signs were posted, party leaders have been notified, and we have a bipartisan.
Okay. This is an action item. Any comment from the board members on this? Any public comment on this, the move of Chester City 1-4-2-1? Okay, with that, do we have a motion to accept the recommendation of the warehouse supervisor?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ms.
And to remind the public, the voters in the 2 affected precincts will now receive through Ms. Winterbottom's office notification of the change of the polling place immediately.
Thank you. Are you intending to present on the 3 under review, or are they held for now?
Well, Darby Borough 1-1, we are doing a survey later today, so we think that may be resolved for the next meeting. So that's all I have for today.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Before I go to public comment, any other comments, Mr. Solicitor, Mr. Allen? Either of the board members? Then I promised a long time ago, I believe, that you would have an opportunity, Miss, to speak about the two-pronged form that was adopted by the government. Please come forward. Thank you.
As we proceed into public comment, I would just remind our chairwoman and the members of the public that public comment is an opportunity to express your position and not an opportunity for a deposition of any member of the Board of Elections or the solicitor or the director.
That's right. And every now and then I allow it because I see Mr. Allen's head bobbing, but that is correct. Thank you. Please proceed.
And that's fine if you're not allowed to answer my questions. If you could just maybe tell me how to get the answers.
Why don't you put all your questions out?
I'll read it again. So the combined form, I mean, I did see it. It's
Oh,
out.
sorry. Will you reintroduce yourself?
Joanne Torillo, Rock Hill Road, Edgemont Township.
Thank you.
So yes, I mean, I don't know if we've all seen it, but I have seen that they're trying to combine the form between voter registration and mail-in ballots, that if you register to vote, you automatically would be given I don't know.
Not automatically. You would also have to fill out affirmatively a whole different section. That was part of our objection.
Right.
Is that they were trying to just make it a checkoff box.
Okay.
And make it so that instead of, there are certain voters who have a different mailing address than their residential address. They get their mail at their sister's house or whatever the case may be. And they tried to take a shortcut and say, where I want to receive my mail ballot, it was too cute by half. And we strongly and vehemently oppose that. So there is a whole different section of the form that the voter must complete. There's a whole separate affirmation or attestation that the voter must complete. And there's now a full blank in the event that the voter wants to receive their ballot at a different address than their registration address. They have to, so we won that battle.
Okay, that's great. And then the second part of that was you had mentioned that there is a discrepancy between when each item is due. So voter registration is due 15 days prior to election, whereas mail-in ballot applications are 7 days prior to the election. Did I get that right, or is that?
Yes, you nailed it.
So how did that get addressed?
So if it's a voter registration form and they're applying to the challenge that we have is if they're changing their address, for example, on their voter registration, and they're also applying to vote by mail, if that arrives less than 15 days before Election Day, we can't change their address. Right. Now, if they are already registered, we can copy that form, get it to our vote by mail staff to determine whether or not there is an existing registration and that we can process their vote by mail application. So it's not a perfect solution, but it's legally sound.
Okay,
thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Hello, I'm Shira Alberts, and I live at 212 Glendale Road in Upper Darby. And I wanted to say that I've really enjoyed having the ballot boxes. They've been really helpful for me. I work every election, as I'm sure all of you do as well. You work a lot more pre and post as well, and I appreciate it. But I serve on a board of elections for primary and general elections. I vote in the 7-3 in Upper Darby, but I serve in the 7-5. So for me to go and vote, I have to leave my post, go over and vote, and then come back. Having the ballot boxes enabling me to vote a week before the election, know that it's done, I get the email saying that it's been received, has really been a wonderful boon for me. And I always vote at the one right by the Upper Darby Township building, and it's a lot of fun. I also wanted to say that in Upper Darby, we currently do not have enough people to serve on our Board of Elections. Many of our boards are missing at least one staff member. So if there's anyone in Delaware County who wishes to serve on a Board of Elections, please come talk to me. We need you to serve on the boards. Thank you.
Thank you for your service on the board. And that's true. We should reiterate that. Are we putting out, I think there was a state program that resulted in, according to the news, quite a number of applicants for to be on boards of election in our county. Is that correct?
Yes. In August, there was a national poll worker day of sorts, and the state did promote heavily on social media and through traditional media platforms the need for poll workers, and they did receive a rather significant response, one that I've not seen before.
That's great. I hope that works out. But I agree with you. Constant call outs for individuals willing to work the polls. It's so important. Any other public comment? Yes, please.
Good morning. My name is Rita Miniak. I reside at 413 Camelot Drive in Brookhaven. I want to thank you for allowing us to speak today. I just want to say something on reconciliation. Reconciliation is the term often used in elections. According to legaldictionary.lawin.org, reconciliation is the verification technique used to ensure that the number of ballots cast in a precinct matches the number of signatures on a voting list. The process, which is codified in Pennsylvania statute and the federal codes, is like balancing a checkbook. Everything needs to match to certify an election. There were unreconciled precincts in May 2022 during the primary election. In the process of completing the 2% audit, the 18-member bipartisan return board found that 105 out of 428 precincts were unreconciled. This was published in a report sent to the Board of Elections and the Director of Elections on June 5th. The Board of Elections ignored the report and certified the primary election anyway on June 6th. Reconciliation is not subjective. On July 7th, the director made a statement in this room that reconciliation is a subjective term, minimizing its importance. Reconciliation is not a subjective term. It is a mathematical process required by law to certify an election. An attempt to diminish it undermines elections and the principles of a constitutional republic. Then everything is subjective. If is your mortgage subjective? How about your electric bill? Is that subjective? Are my taxes, which are paid to this county and which provide for the salaries of its employees, subjective? Facts do not cease to exist just because they are ignored. A fact is something that is known to have happened or exist, especially something for which proof exists or about which there is information. And I thank you for your time. I didn't realize this was voluntary, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I may, although I did not have the opportunity to address it during the report, we have reviewed the return board report. I want to revisit some of the remarks that were just made, though. The report was not ignored. The report was incomplete. The return board continued to work through June. They did not get us a list of the 100. I doubt you have a list of the precincts, because we didn't get it until the end of July of what precincts they were referencing. We were not saying that it was subjective on reconciliation. What I was saying is that the determination that 2 is reconciled, 2 off is reconciled, but 3 or 4 off is not reconciled, that is subjective. So since then, staff have been able to revisit the 100 precincts in question. We did have more resources than the return board had. So we had the paper poll books, for example. We also had the return sheets that were in the gray ballot bags. And keep in mind, at the time that the return board was initially trying to do its work, we were also going through a countywide, statewide recount. So the return sheets with the seals and so that we could check that the seals were the seals that were placed by the judges, those needed to be present at that recount while the return board was attempting to finish its work. So given that, our staff, so I just want to make sure that you understand that I'm not taking any shot at the return board or its work. But the return board did not complete its work for whatever reasons. Staff has the advantage of having more resources. We're able to go through, look at the poll books, as opposed to just the numbered list, or in some cases, the lack of the numbered list, right? So they would just throw up their arms and say, well, we couldn't reconcile. Well, we had the poll book with the actual signatures from each voter who came in person on Election Day after it had been processed by voter registration. And we did, in fact, reconcile all of these precincts in question. So then We'll get that. We haven't had a chance to go over that with the return board, but I also want to add to this, that there have always been this many, or an approximate number of this many, that during the return board process that they deemed irreconcilable. This is the first time, though, that this draft report, it was not a complete report, was ever released. And, that we did take it seriously. We did go through, but the idea that being 2 off the numbered list as opposed to 3 or 4 off makes it irreconcilable, or that there's an indication of fraud, is patently false. And that's where I hope we can find common ground, ma'am.
And I look forward, to, Mr. Allen, to the to you reporting back after you've had that conversation with the return board members that are reassembled. Thank you. Have you spoken during this public comment or just different ones?
The other one.
Okay,
It was
then
Dropboxes.
please, you have
So
3 minutes.
this is the open one.
Okay,
And I have
yes,
3
it is.
minutes,
It is
I'm
the
aware.
open one.
I just want to clarify, I've been falsely accused of getting information, and the case that I have has been settled and everything. Fact, I wrote a report, I gave it to the DA sealed the report. I got a call from a detective, never spoke to the DA, never spoke to anyone else. The detective said there was no chain of custody for the bag of ballots. And it could have been, it could have been, could have been. There has been no clarification since then. I've gotten no report since then. I've gotten no information. It's been 4 months. I just don't want it to be swept under the rug. That's all I'm asking. This is not a partisan. I'm an independent. I do have a letter behind me, but I am an independent. I am not one party or the other. I'm not a political hack. I've volunteered many different elections, different times. It's nothing against the people that work the polls and donate their time every election, nothing against them. It was paid employees that brought a ballot from their car into the thing. That's all I'm asking. That's what the guy said. But anyway, I'm not going to argue with you. But that is what I heard.
It's,
Uh,
well, okay,
it's an ongoing case. We're not allowed to talk about it.
Do you have any other public comment?
And no, yes, I had a question about the ballots. When they get mailed out and they have a wrong address, or they moved, or they died, what happens to the ballots? Do they get destroyed?
No, they
go recirculate?
How about Mr. Allen, she finishes all her public comment, and then if you would like to respond.
All right, ongoing. If there's ongoing lawsuits, because this might become a lawsuit if, people falsely accuse me of lying and getting information when I've never been spoken to by anyone, and that it's just because I didn't get the right answer. I don't want all the information disappearing. I was wondering if we can extend the 20 months to maybe 3 years so stuff doesn't disappear, especially cameras, because in the wharf there's cameras, everything's on camera, everything's recorded, and I want access to cameras. Also, the drop boxes, again, why do we even have it? COVID's over. We don't need them. I understand some people can't make it there. I understand. That's why you would do the mail-in. If not, have one drop box. It's riddled with chances of crime, let's phrase it that way, if you have multiple. If you only have one, then everyone who has an issue can go to the one and drop it in at any time. But one secure one that has cameras, security, so that we have a chain of custody and everyone's not guessing, was there fraud, wasn't there fraud? Why do we have to go through all this? It always seems like we have to create chaos. Why can't we simplify, make it very simple? I mean, there's an expression, make it simple, stupid. Just make it simple.
I think the 3 minutes is
Okay.
up, but, so thank you. I just want to say a couple things. I'm going to say, I'm not necessarily giving you an opportunity to respond. I was a federal prosecutor for almost a decade. I don't know if you know that, and did many, many, many criminal investigations. And the integrity of a criminal investigation, it's done. We have a system of government where there are different branches. This is not something that I take lightly, the idea that we should not comment on ongoing investigations by another a division of government, in this case, the District Attorney's Office. So I say that because that is important to the integrity of all investigations, that they not be interfered with by, especially people who, although we're volunteers, we're sitting here in a public forum speaking on important issues related, the allegations, the investigation are related to that work. It would be highly inappropriate for us to comment on it. The second thing is, three of us are lawyers. Mr. Alberts and Mr. Allen are probably happy not to be lawyers, perhaps, but when we could certainly never advise you about whether you're considering litigation or not. And if you are in any manner, you should consult with your own lawyer. But I don't want anything that this board or any of us says to ever be construed as legal to you or to anybody else. And the third thing is, if Mr. Allen, I would encourage you, if what you indicated was a potential threat of litigation, just that would be another area where I would discourage anybody on this board or Mr. Allen or the solicitor from responding to at all. That would be wholly inappropriate in my view as a lawyer. So and it's not a public comment. I just wanted to say that as we go forward, because I do think Mr. Allen wanted to potentially comment.
Frustration. It's more frustration. I'm told by you that it's an ongoing investigation.
But it's
I am
not our
told by the
investigation.
council.
Ms. Buckley, it's not our investigation.
Okay.
If you have concerns, those are appropriately raised with the district attorney's office.
Okay.
They're not appropriately raised with us. They just aren't. We can't
But it's
comment
part
on
of
it.
election?
But once it's referred to a criminal investigator, that referral is essentially complete, and then all of us make ourselves available as needed by the district attorney if we need to be interviewed, if anything needs to be collected from us. That is our role then. We are obviously different from a witness, but in a way we are subject to their process, just as any witnesses. So that is why it's so important that we don't comment on it. The district attorneys may choose to say, I want to talk to the Board of Elections. If they choose to do that, and we're sitting here at a public comment without knowing what they're working on, when we've made the proper referral, that would be wholly inappropriate. So we're not going to do it. So, but thank you. But I didn't know, Mr. Allen, if you did have thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I just would like to recommend, when you have observers and poll watchers, that there is some kind of course. If they do come across something, right now I'm floundering out here trying to find what I was supposed to be doing, and I'm playing catch up because there is nothing in any manual, any situation that tells you what do you do if you come across something. That's all I'm asking.
If you do it, you raised it, it was referred, and that was what should happen, and that will be carried out, the investigation by the district attorney's office on their time frame with their process that we don't get engaged with. But Mr. Allen, we do need to finish.
No. I was just asking. That was the manual. I wasn't talking about this situation. I was just talking in general. When you go for your training for observer and stuff, there is nothing in there at all that says what happened, what steps do you do if you come across anything. There's nothing.
Observers or poll watchers.
There's nothing.
We do not train them.
Who's training observers are you referencing?
Well, the candidates are training, as well as there is a course for poll watching, and you just recommended you were going to.
We have nothing to do with that. Those are partisan trainings. We don't involve ourselves. We train our poll workers, not observers, not poll watchers.
It's also in the poll watcher manual too. There's nothing for
I can't speak to a poll watcher manual. We don't do such a thing. That's not our document. That's a partisan document from some political party, presumably. I'm not familiar with it. We train poll workers, the people who work in the local election boards.
Even the poll workers, is there something for?
Yes. Poll workers have very clear instructions on what to do in the event of a problem. Very clear.
Okay. Is there any way other people can view that process?
It's available online.
Yeah, it's available online.
It's a 70-page document.
Okay.
Mr. Allen, I didn't know if there was or wasn't at this point.
There was only one question that was raised that deserves a clear answer. Vote by mail ballots use non-forwardable mail, so any undeliverable mail is returned to our office and it's maintained. In the event, there was also a question about a deceased voter. If a voter dies after they've applied, or even after they've returned it early in the process and we're notified of that death, that ballot envelope is excluded and separated from the count, and it's not processed on Election Day.
Thank you. Sir?
Good morning. I think
It's still the morning.
Okay. I don't want to be wrong on the first thing I
did look when
said.
the last person said.
My name is Chris Fabre. I live at 7103 Sellers Avenue in Upper Darby. Ironically, I got an email yesterday about being a poll worker, and I haven't been a poll worker since 2020. I had a very bad experience with that. I won't get into that today, but who knows, maybe I'll take it up again. The last primary, I had an opportunity to go down to the Chester County Center. When I got there, I was sort of surprised. I just figured that it would be like a more secure location. There was a lot of elevators, a lot of doorways to get in and out of the place. Granted, when you got to the counting center, it was very secure. But apparently, the county is going to move that counting center to the county seat, which is what it should do by law. Is that still in the works?
What, and please complete all your questions or comments.
Okay, all right. I have quite a few,
yeah,
okay. But, for example, at the wharf, I was watching the video feeds that the county provided, and lo and behold, 2 custodians walked in there. They walked into another room where there was no camera feed, and at that point, there was no security. The park guards had left for the night. Those are the kind of things that concern me. I'm sure there's no hanky-panky with that, but I mean, just the optics are bad with that. The other thing I want to talk about is chain of custody procedures. This is spelled out by the Secretary of State when the machines are certified, that along with the certification, a strict chain of custody is mandated. As far as I can figure out, there is no written chain of custody procedure for ballots, V-drives, etc., going from Rose Tree Park to the wharf. And not only that, apparently there's no custody logs for all that material. I've requested that. I've requested a manual or whatever. Others have done so, and we either get something that is irrelevant or the request is denied. But I must say the county has a great manual on the ballot boxes. I did receive that, very thorough, so my compliments. My question with that, though, is after the November election, will the public have access to the ballot logs and custody logs on how those ballots are moved from the drop boxes to wherever they go? Okay, that's another question.
Thank you, sir. I do think
Already?
perfect timing.
Okay.
Okay. I think that Mr. Allen, Mr. Parks, we have reviewed the process, including from start to finish, the ballot boxes and the collection, and at other points in time. We didn't schedule that as part of this report, so Mr. Allen, unless you're compelled, I think that is something worth a presentation on some of these issues and these questions, but I don't know that today is the right day because it does involve a sort of comprehensive. I think everybody has a right to have the transparency to understand
That's all I'm
how
asking
we
for.
intend to proceed, and I'm just wondering if it might be more appropriately slated as an agenda item for another meeting.
Can I make one last comment? I
Yes.
just feel that it would be nice, for example, at the end of October, to have a procedure on chain of custody by the end of October. Then we could review it and know exactly what happens after the judge of election drops off all their material at Rose Street Park. What happens to it?
And I've seen the solicitor has done that historically, so I'm just wondering whether or not, I don't want to do it off the cuff. I think that's something more appropriate as we get, Mr. Allen and Mr. Parks, do you have any view of that? That's my thought, is that we schedule a discussion about that at as we get closer to the election, perhaps even at the next board meeting.
I think that makes some good sense. I will say that we have secure chain of custody on all ballots and election-related materials such as V-drives.
So for example, there's a unique tamper evidence seal that's got a unique number on it. That is maintained all the way.
I was a judge of elections, and I understand all that.
That is maintained all the way through even the recount process,
Okay,
along with the log of who removed the seal, who resealed it. So additionally, the V drives arrive not individually; they arrive in Tyvek envelopes that are sealed across the tamper evident envelopes that are signed across the seal. That wasn't in effect when you were a judge. That was something we put into effect in the May 2021 election.
Can we get that information?
That's in the judge of election book.
No.
I think, I do think that, I mean, just like the solicitor has made a presentation on chain of custody, I think maybe every election that I've been involved in, and Mr. Allen talks about that, there are procedures for receiving the materials back when they're scanned back in. There's certain scanning materials. There's certain chain of custody things that just, I think, might require a deeper dive. So I appreciate your feedback.
Are they written? Are the procedures written?
I'm sure some of them are. I'm not sure.
Remind you that if the chain of custody information is in the form of a legal memorandum from the lawyer for the board to the board or to the director, it's privileged communication. It's not going to be made public.
When we established the chain of custody procedures, the solicitor presented to the board privileged material. That means under the attorney-client privilege. And there's other reasons that you want to be careful about certain written materials circulating because you don't want to create opportunity for interference. But that said, I think we will do an open, transparent presentation on the chain of custody. I'd appreciate that, Mr. Solicitor. He's done it. He's done it, I think, every time. Let's do that. We'll table that. And if you aren't able to attend the meeting, the good news is our meetings are recorded, so you'll have the opportunity to review that.
Okay, because I'm confused about that, because I'm interested in something that, like I said, the ballot box, the poll workers guide, Rose Street Park to the wharf. That's.
No, I understand. Yeah. We aim to be transparent to the extent that we can, and then there are certain materials such as privileged materials that we.
Fine, we can sort that out.
But that doesn't mean there aren't public information that we can make available. So it's our intention to do that. That's certainly my intention. Please.
Thank you so much for your service. We are all trying to get to free and fair and transparent elections. So thank you as volunteers for all that you do. We do really appreciate it. This is a lot to deal with. My name is Dr. Karen Fritz. I live at 901 Powder Mill Lane in Wynwood. It's 8-1. My comments are a little bit in line with Chris's. On reviewing the Pennsylvania Election Code, I was glad to see that a section on observers, it reads, in addition, each political party or political body shall be entitled to have observers at the Central Tabulation Center in a number as determined by the County Board of Elections, sufficient to permit accurate observation. That's my key, accurate observation of the receipt, handling, duplication, and processing of all ballots and district total cards. So part of the handling involves chain of custody. Let me tell you about what we saw election night of the primary election this last May. This has been presented before. It goes along with the chain of custody. We saw a grocery bag full of V drives that were not in Tyvek containers. They were just free. They were poured onto the table in front of us and said, okay, we need to process these. We, as observers, were supposed to be looking for accurate observation of the handling of ballots. So we said, hey, like, where's the chain of custody? Where did those come from? You're not allowed to ask questions. We then turned around and filed right-to-know requests for what's the chain of custody? This is not being presented. There's no chain of custody here that we can see. So it really likes some kind of a process that we can follow, that we can do our jobs as observers. We need to be able to see the accurate receipt, handling, duplication, and processing. That's what the election code tells us we have to do. And we're trying to take that seriously. So where did that maybe totally fine? We don't know. And we're denied probably 30 right-to-know requests at this point. So that's one with the V drives. The other thing is I'd like to actually ask if we can revisit the issue that I brought up many times here, There is a back internet room where V drives and flash drives just go back and forth. They're put into one computer, they go back to update the internet, they go to another computer. As an observer, I cannot follow any chain of custody. And I don't think anyone can follow a chain of custody of a ballot, a box of precinct ballots, a V drive, or a flash drive at the wharf. No one can. No observer can. I don't think this is right. And this is what leads to people not having trust in our elections. So please, Gerald Lawrence said that he would consider having bipartisan observers in the back internet room. I'd like that to be considered again for the next election. Thank you.
Mr. Allen, you look like you want to speak. I'm still inclined to discuss that in a broader
Madam Chair,
context. But,
this misstatement of the facts has occurred at the county council last week and now again today. And in defense of my staff, it's indefensible. I'm sorry.
This is not about your staff.
Ma'am,
It's about the process.
I allowed you to state all these things without interrupting you, and I would appreciate if you didn't interrupt me while I defend my staff. I know the two individuals who participated in what you alleged and wrongly alleged to have happened. There were no V drives dumped out. That's a falsehood. We have video that would have certainly been alerted or observed by someone other than you. And you know why it wasn't? Because it didn't happen. The V drives come back to us in Tyvek envelopes that are sealed and then signed across the seal by at least 2 poll workers. That was what was put out on the table. The 2 individuals who did it are here. Are you going to stand here and tell me that I also didn't see it and they don't know what they did? They individually opened with a scissors, each one. They logged each one in. And they were the closest to the poll observers, the central count observers, of any table in the entire room. They were literally 2 feet from the stanchions, so you could stand closer than you and I are right now and watch them as they did their work. For you to come here 3 months later and say this twice, first before the county council and now again today, it's totally provably false. If you want us to bring the Tyvek envelopes in, if you want us to bring in the checklist, the spreadsheet where they check off each precinct as they're opening it up, we'd be more than happy to do that. But if you want me to stand here and just sit here and listen to this over and over again when it's completely provably false, I'm not going to do it.
Are we at time on the comment? Okay. I watched the county council meeting in preparation for this meeting, and I do want to say something about the sort of back and forth about whether accusations of a lack of integrity of our elections are accusations against the staff, as Mr. Allen has rightfully defended the staff. They are. Our election staff are government workers. They take oaths to fulfill their duties. If they were aware of activities of fraud that compromise the election integrity, then they would have an obligation under those duties to report those and see that they were investigated and gotten rid of, because that is what they are here to do, is to run an election that has all of the integrity that all of us deserve and need as an important democratic society. So that is why I believe, I'm speaking now for myself, I don't want to get into Mr. Allen's head, but when I hear comments about the election integrity that involves things that our staff oversees, I do see it as an attack on the staff, that they're not doing their job, and I know that they are. So that's just something to think about as to why that may elicit such a strong reaction in defense of such a great team, because Mr. Allen said it, they are the best team. I'm going to say, certainly in the country, is my view. They are amazing, and they have gone through so much, and this is such an important county. We're the 4th largest in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has got the eyes of the world on it. We did during the last presidential election. We do now all the time. I think in this election, we could say that there are at least 2 elections that everybody in the world may be looking at to find out where America is going in terms of our elections, right? And so everything we do has got to be that if you want to vote for whatever candidate, it really isn't my business, but that you're able to do so fully and fairly. So that is why I think that just when you think about the comments, accusations about fraud, particularly fraud that may involve election, our staff being present when the accusation is being made that fraud occurred, is so something that we so strongly bristle against. because they are great staff and they fulfill their duties. And I believe that if they saw any fraud, it would have been raised. I know that. It's not a belief. I know that. But thank you for your comments. And I think your time is done. Is anybody else still? And you commented earlier, right? Not during this period. Okay, then you've got 3 minutes.
It was on a specific. Louis Troffer, 901 Powder Mill Lane, Wynwood. Jim, there's a crossing of the Rubicon, if you know what I mean by that analogy. I'm sure you do. Here we go.
I know you're a lawyer.
Yes.
So up here, if you could talk to us, and if Mr. Allen chooses to respond, but
It's called crossing the Rubicon, and I was a wharf observer, Mr. Allen, and as we're here sitting, there were 2 individuals. I do not see them here. I'm sitting behind the observer area, and I'm seated, and I'm watching this, and I'm watching the entire operations, and I don't see fraud. I don't see anything other than a casualness. But I'm do I believe myself or my lying eyes? I know what I saw. I saw this, and there was and I'm trying to describe. It's a cloth bag that you would reuse going to a shopping, like a shopping center, go figure, grocery store. And I don't want to use adjectives, but there was a well-nourished woman, and then there was a less well-nourished woman. And the less well-nourished woman had a clipboard, and the other woman, I don't know where to origin from. She pulls a bag, and it's that bag. It's a canvas cloth shopping bag. And she dumps it on the table, and the woman with a clipboard starts going through it. I saw it. And again, what am I going to do with that? Is that like fraud? Am I alleging fraud? No, I'm just saying I saw it. And to say that that staff is perfect and has never had anything like that, I saw it. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry, because this is getting vitriolic. I'm not vitriolic because it's been 3 months, and I didn't take this up because, frankly, what's a frankly for it? It's crossing the Rubicon. I don't want to cross the Rubicon, and I have now. But this is what I saw, and you can't tell me I didn't see it. You can't tell me, oh, I'm wrong, I'm incorrect. I mean, we have subjective impressions, and I have a subjective impression of what I saw. You didn't see what I saw. I did.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's it. That was it.
Can I make a couple comments?
I did. I'm sorry. I did have 2 other items, but I just.
Why don't you use your 3 minutes?
Yeah, finish up. Thank you. And this is just down the road. With the section or Act 88, I wasn't clear, Mr. Allen, if this has been adopted by the Board of Elections Council. It seemed like the language was, we're looking into it, we're agreeing to it, and we're implementing it. Has that happened?
Act 88 is a state law.
I'm sorry. To be clear, voter registration, vote by mail application. Has that been agreed to?
That's a state form.
So it's now part of Delaware County. Is that correct?
Yes, we
Got
don't.
it.
That's Secretary of the Commonwealth dictates the forms under law. It's in the election code.
Thank you. It's just not my area of law. If I could, this is the scenario that I'd like to have addressed after we get through the other comment. So using the scenario, 14 days for someone to have received a application for voter registration and an application for mail-in ballot, is there a scenario where the person fills out the voter registration application and the mail-in application, and they're able to vote in the current election, but there's been no vetting of the voter registration, the accuracy of the voter registration? There's no vetting. So theoretically,
There's not a scenario.
There's not a scenario.
There's not a
The answer is
scenario
there is not.
that you described.
Okay, so it's not that quick. Somebody's got to turn around and confirm that they're a registered voter.
Of course.
And then, thank you. It wasn't clear to me, and I need to have that spelled out because it's so quick and it's such a change going on right now. So it's not.
There's not a big change. Somebody took 2 forms and tried to put them on 1 form. That's
Right,
the change.
there were 2 different offices that were doing checks and balances.
Right.
And that's why.
That's still happening.
Now it's 1 office, and that's kind of scary.
It's 2 offices.
No,
That's
two
the
offices
logistical
still.
problem
That's
that Mr. Allen was describing, is that you have 1 form that has to get processed by 2 offices.
I see.
That's the complicating factor, and you have to make a copy of the form, and you have to make sure those 2 offices are totally coordinated, and that you jump through the hoops and the proper steps and all that. It's a logistics issue. There's not a huge change.
It wasn't unique.
Two
to us.
forms were combined into two parts of one piece of paper.
Thank you. I think your timer, I'm gonna give you a little bit extra.
Lastly, I had sent an agenda to the, who do I call him? Delaware County Board of Elections at the Seaport Tribe. And Mr. Allen, I want to thank you. The majority of the things I'd asked to be put on the agenda were addressed. Some of my things were a little too obtuse, but I appreciate the attention to it. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McBlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I think that your suggestion, Madam Chair, of having a presentation in the future on the chain of custody is an excellent idea. I know this has been something that has come up in bits and pieces here and there. I'm sorry. Not hearing me usually is not a problem, but I think that this issue has come up from time to time. I think it's an excellent idea. I have seen, what chains of custody do there. I know that it's the public's right and to have those documents if they want to see them. The chain of custody between Rose Tree Park and the Chester Wharf building that night. That's an excellent question. So I do think that that's a great idea to have that presentation of what happens when something gets bagged up at the end of the night at the precinct to the time when that vote gets processed and the V drive comes to the wharf. The issue of V drives, we can always look to do whatever better. I've been there in 2020, 2021, 2020 and 2021, and then the primary of 2022. Each time, and either as an observer or as a member of the board, I've stood there, maybe on one side of the rope or the other, but I've stood there. So I want to clear these questions up. I have had conversations, I do, but no matter whether it came in a CVS bag or whether it came in a Lloyd's of London sealed container, what I always point out is there are checks and balances, and this is to sort of address other issues that people raise. If somebody, and it's not the case, but if somebody were criminally intending, a member of the staff criminally intending to sort of sneak V drives in and put them there are other checks and balances. The whole idea of the reconciliation. If somebody were to introduce a V drives with 50,000 additional votes on it, as some people have suggested, there would be a check and a balance against that. It wouldn't reconcile. You've heard the discussion here today about the reconciliation. We talk about 2 or 3 or 4, votes not, or numbers not matching in a precinct. Well, if you had added an additional 50,000 votes in Delaware County to the numbers, you'd be missing 50,000 people signing in. You'd be missing, 50,000 other. That's why we go through those checks and balances. So I think we owe it to the public to try to make sure that you understand, that this is a free and fair process. And if we can make that presentation, I think that's a great idea to discuss the chain of custody, because that's an issue that's come up. How V drives get handled, from the time that they leave the precincts until the time that they get put into the computer, as Mr. Allen says, that is literally 2 feet behind, where the observation area is. I think those are all great ideas, but there are other checks and balances in the system to prevent crime, to prevent fraud. And I think it's important that we get that message out there. So that's my comments, Madam Chair.
Mr. Alberts, did you have any comment? Oh, we're still in the public. Okay, please come forward.
At noon. Good morning.
Good afternoon.
I do thank you for your work as volunteers in service to the community, to the county. With reference to the difficulties...
Ma'am, can you just state your name?
I'm sorry, Karis Coker, 836 Concord Road. With regards to your concern about being able to vote and working in an election and at a distance, absentee ballot. Nobody's opposed to the continued use of absentee ballots for people who have a stated specific reason that getting to their voting place is a challenge. That would take care of your concern without the ballot drop boxes.
Just to be clear, people can drop absentee ballots in the ballot drop boxes as well.
But my point being that there's an absentee ballot is a as a provision for such needs. With regards to this lady's question or her concerns about what they testified that they saw watching down at the wharf, why couldn't their questions have been answered? Why couldn't someone say to them what it was that they were doing? Why were they denied the inquiry which they made in response to their duties? Concerns about elections go back a long way. Way before that, 1992, there was an election where there was a third-party candidate that had more votes than any other candidate in Pennsylvania history. We worked on that campaign. After the election, the news results were announced at KYW as 51% for one candidate and 49% for the other. I called the newsroom and said, that's not accurate. Our candidate got over 5% of the vote. Well, we're not reporting his returns. We're only reporting the returns of Arlen Specter and Yackel in reference to one another. So there's been a coordinated effort between major parties and news media for a long time that causes my concern about getting to the root of what's really going on. But there are 2 points. You mentioned the oath that individuals take. I don't know whether you have an oath of office in your position serving on the Board of Elections.
They do.
And in Washington's farewell address, which used to be required reading for every high school student every year, he spoke to the importance of and the value of an oath and the obligations of that oath. And we're in a time and an age when an oath is held very lightly. I'm not saying that each of you hold it lightly, but I'm saying we're in a time when it's held very lightly. And even the fact of the affirmation that's provided for in the Pennsylvania law was to accommodate the tender conscience of the Quaker. It was not seen to accommodate, as I have observed in courtrooms and in other instances, a total dismissal of any superior or divine being to which we have any moral obligation. Enough said. The maintenance of our republic and our freedom is essential to maintain the consent of the governed, and elections are essential, the essential component to the consent of the governed. And much rest, the magnitude of what is in consequence of an election that is properly validated and carried out is, the magnitude is tremendous. And I'm sure you're aware of that. Just remember that. And as to the comments that have been made and vitriolic comments that have been made to individuals who have expressed concern based on very real facts and evidence. However much the courts across the country have refused to even look at the evidence, where is there to be a redress of grievances? Hopefully, we do have the appeal to heaven that our grandfathers and our forefathers had, but there's supposed to be a redress of grievances here in this county, in this courthouse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Gay, did you move forward because you wanted to speak? Oh, I didn't.
Briefly, there was a question just now as far as why this question wasn't addressed any sooner. Last week's county council meeting was the first time that this allegation has ever been submitted, whether vocally or by email or letter. So
I meant answered at the wharf when the question was asked, what is that?
it wasn't asked at the wharf because it didn't happen.
Ms. Gay.
I just want to thank you all for your time and patience.
Sorry, you still good?
My name is Colleen Guiney, 337 Dickinson Avenue. I also just wanted to comment, having been involved in elections for over 20 years in Delaware County, I just want to thank you all for the continued increase in professionalism and the work that you have done, particularly on the public-facing website. And I just want for anyone watching this to make sure that they go check the Delco Votes page. Many of the questions that are being raised can be answered by reviewing the material that has been so carefully and diligently prepared. I have not read every page of every link on that, but I know Many times when I call the office and I have a very specific question, the staff is often very eagerly wanting to help me find it on the website, and there it was. So if you have a problem and you're not sure of something, I would just recommend as a voter of the public that you consider looking at that website, and if you can't find something, put in a quick call, because so much of what we need to know is already out there. And this is stuff that wasn't there 5 or 10 years ago, and now it is. So I just want to thank you for the development of so many tools for our voters and for the transparency that you have shown over the years. So thank you again. Didn't want to take up too much of your time.
And I don't think you've spoken during this public comment period, or have you? No. No? Then please come forward.
Thank you. Yes, Joy Schwartz again from Drexel Hill. So I want to just remind the Board of Elections that we had issues in the past that are affecting the perception and the confidence that people have today. And I actually have an exhibit for you. I do have copies, so I'm going to give a copy to Mr. Allen. I'll show this to the camera, if I may. This is a copy of a trash can. It is, in the trash can is a return sheet from my precinct, 3-3 Upper Darby. It is signed by Dante Flaminio, who is my judge of elections, and by Ann Rigney, who is the minority inspector of my precinct. Interestingly enough, I happened to notice this picture, and I recognize the signature because Dante Flaminio is also my plumber, and I've received bills from him with his signature on it. Why is his return sheet in the trash? Now, we've asked questions like this before, and we're told that no, these must have been a copy of somebody else's return sheet, but as you can see here, there's handwritten paper that is in green ink, or blue ink perhaps, on a legal pad. That's not a copy of anything, and I cannot imagine, under any circumstances, why this stuff would be in the trash. Now, I know, Mr. Allen, you were not here in 2020. This was actually a photograph from 2021 that happened at the voter machine warehouse. And so I see stuff like this, and you have to understand that when the public sees things like this, they have a right to question and to ask questions and to come here and to make comments. And if there's some kind of reasonable explanation for this, I'm all ears, but I just cannot imagine it. Basically, there's a lot of people who have no idea what happened in 2020, and I'm not trying to bring it all back, but there are people that think I'm crazy and I'm a liar. There are most of the people, I'm sure the great majority of the workers, election workers at the wharf and in the precincts were innocently doing their jobs, trusting those in charge, and were not aware that they could possibly be part of some kind of scam. Then there are people who may have suspected that, something might not quite look right, but didn't feel confident speaking out and just basically maybe turned a blind eye. There were others that maybe saw it all. And we know that there were people that saw it all because it was covered up. This was part of the cover-up. Then there's a handful, probably a very small nucleus, maybe just a couple of bad actors that maybe pulled this off with help from the outside. That's just my opinion. I'm throwing it out there. You see, I want to move forward, but the gaslighting has got to stop. I just have a comment about logic and accuracy tests. If I have any more time left, I know that you guys have been very indulgent. No? I'm out?
We have another meeting this month if you want to.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you very much for the meeting on chain of custody. That's very much needed, and I so do appreciate having that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I should extend the meeting any longer. I do want to say one thing. As again, I have an investigative background. A picture, a photograph, by itself doesn't mean anything to me. That's the type of thing that needs to be investigated appropriately. Someone could say on TikTok that they committed a crime, but that doesn't mean they did it, okay? And all of those things, everything that has the appearance of something that is maybe something that people say, ooh, that should be appropriately investigated. If you ever know of, now there's criminal investigations that we make referrals to, and there's also constant improvement by our team to try to improve the election process. So I do encourage you, we're not going backwards, we're going forwards. We're gonna present how we're gonna do it this election. We're gonna keep moving forward. If there's things that are open, they're being handled appropriately. But I do encourage you, if you think that something is inappropriate, the best time to raise it is at the time. Because that's when everything's fresh. So just something to think about as we go into the next election. If you have concerns, whether they're just, what could this be? It might not be crime, but it's something. Or if you have a criminal referral, at the time is the best time to raise it. So it has meaning. Thank you. Thank you. Please come forward.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Joanne Stump, 16 Flyway Drive, Newtown Square. Citizens of Delaware County have seen evidence of problems in our elections. All votes have the expectation to be treated fairly and equally. Each ballot and each vote is to be given the same weight and value, and no class of voters is to be diminished in any way. But evidence shows that all votes have not been equal. Some precincts are not reporting their results. Some return sheets, tapes, or V-drives have gone missing. Data from some precincts is not reconciled. Yet the county certifies the election anyway. That sure seems like maladministration. It may not be deliberate. I don't blame any one person. But if some voters are being treated differently than others, for any reason, that could be both a criminal and civil matter. The public has seen evidence of spoliation, of election materials discarded, return sheets, and ripped up scanner tapes. Yet there's no real investigation, and discovery has been denied, as cases have been dismissed without evidentiary hearings. Problems continue in subsequent election cycles, and the maladministration of elections is not being addressed. Perhaps it's time to take this matter out of the hands of local officials. The term RICO could apply. I'd like to add that I've been coming here for several months now at the council meetings. I've not attended this meeting yet. But what brought me there initially was viewing videotapes of election officers ripping up data, scanners, whatever. It was just ripping it up. It's on video. It's on video. And I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, you're telling somebody to get rid of the pads and the second scanners. It's on video. That made me want to throw up.
Please finish your comment, but let's not talk to anybody directly other than us.
Okay, I'm sorry, but this is what I saw. It's what millions of people are saying. It's there. That's why this case is in appeals. They got a book on it. We are very famous, Delaware County. And it's a shame. It's very sad. I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or you're the party from the moon. It's not a partisan issue. This is the state of this is the trajectory of our country. What determines where our country goes, it's the election. That's ground zero. And if we can't make sure that that's secure, we don't have a country. We don't have a country. Thank you.
Speak to this. Jim, I'm going to speak to this. I just want everybody to know. There are these repeated allegations about this video and the second scanner. There are representations floating around that was from 2020. Jim Allen didn't work in Delaware County until 2021. So he either time traveled into 2020 or it wasn't about 2020. And it wasn't about 2020. What it was about was an extremely dishonest, misleadingly edited and presented to the public video. The discussion, for people who care to know the truth, is that there was a time up until 2021 when Jim Allen came that we had multiple scanners in precincts, in higher volume voting precincts with more people. As we've heard today, there are precincts with as many as 2,000 people in them or more. However, the best practices and thinking with respect to election administration is that extra scanners don't actually speed things up very much in the precinct, because that's not the bottleneck of the process. The bottleneck of the process is people filling out their ballots or getting signed in. And having more scanners just creates a situation where you have election boards that have to get more equipment set up, and they have more equipment to take down, and then you have multiple V drives per precincts and all of these other election administration problems. So Mr. Allen made the wise and supported by all the best practices nationally in elections to remove the second scanners from the precincts that historically had had more than one scanner. That was the comment captured on the video. He's recommending that going forward, we get rid of multiple scanners in precincts. We only have one scanner. He wasn't talking about getting rid of any results of any scanners. He certainly wasn't talking about general election 2020 when he wasn't here. And by the way, this was all referred to the DA. The DA reviewed it. The DA released a very detailed statement to the public about it and noted that the person who had made the video would not even cooperate with the DA's investigation. So I think it is time that we put this to bed. There's the truth, and then there are a bunch of people who really don't seem to want to confront the reality of what's going on. By the way, I would point out, we've had multiple recounts, election after election after election over the last 2 years. Elections where people are claiming V drives are being produced from grocery bags. Yet somehow, when they did a full-blown recount where they cut the tabs in front of the party officials of both parties and the candidate representatives, cut the tabs that show the chain of custody, and ran those ballots back through different scanners, the results were so close to identical. There was a 3-vote difference, and what it came down to was if you looked at the ballot, the scanner wouldn't read the mark, but you could see a mark on the ballot. So, and that was 3 ballots in all of Delaware County. 3-vote difference in the primary this year. Other recounts, similar results. These things have been litigated. I don't know if you folks are paying attention, but these things have been litigated in 2021. Multiple municipal races were litigated. Lawyers for both sides looked at all of the record evidence. You know what happened in those cases? They were withdrawn once everybody realized that the results were right. It is true. You can sit there and say it's not true. I'm the solicitor for the Board of Elections. I know what goes on in courts. I work with the lawyers for the candidates. This is the reality. These things are tested by recount. They're tested by multiple backup systems. And somebody throwing out a completely disingenuous, misleading video of a snippet of a conversation and then claiming it was about destroying records is craziness. And by the way, that's why judges like Jack Whalen, who was the Republican DA for this county for 2 terms before being elected to the bench, threw the case out. So this has got to stop. We need to look forward. We can definitely improve our processes. We can definitely be more clear in terms of how we do things. But the idea that there's systematic fraud that's apparently bipartisan goes all the way to the judicial system, goes all the way to people who've been employed in this Board of Election or by the Board of Elections for 15 years, and it's somehow huge, some huge conspiracy, just is just so far from anything that makes any sense or reality that it just bears comment. And it's really, people can come and have their 3 minutes, but just so the public understands, this is, we're running a good election system in Delaware County, the best in the Commonwealth as far as I'm concerned. And, if there's any doubt about it, just attend a recount. You'll see. The numbers come out right when they go back to the ballots, and there's no way to fake that. So that's my comment on it.
Yes, thank you, Solicitor.
Hi, my name is Jody Holston. I live on Spring Tree Drive in Newtown Square. I want to thank you for your service and your time. I also just want to reiterate I was a minority inspector in 2020 in Marple 5-2. I had never been an inspector before. I had been a poll watcher. I went through hours of training. I received a book that was this thick of what we had to do in order to have this election. I braved COVID at the time, wore my mask, had a shield on, was there from 6 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. I was with our judge of elections is a Republican. We all got along. I was most impressed with how efficient and how fair this election was, as from my standpoint. We had to, if you indulge me just for a minute, and I don't know if I'm allowed to even say this.
For 3 minutes.
Okay, all right, 3 minutes. We had to, there's a case with all the equipment in it. We had to check all of the tabs to make sure that they all matched, the scanners, to, on the cage that it was in. We had to hold on to those, that we had to check them when we were putting them back. We all did that, we all watched. We have the election book, which is open. If someone comes in and they say their name, hi, I'm Joanne Holston, we look. If I had voted by mail, my name is not on that list. I cannot vote. I have to go either a provisional or they call to find out if my vote had been received. There were 2 books, so when we verified that that person really was on the list, Joanne Holston's on there, we got a number. People filled it in on a handwritten book with a number. That person was then given a ballot. They went in and they filled the ballot in pencil, or pen. They then went into the scanner, of which it was manned. The scanner was manned the entire time that we were there. They scanned their ballot and they left. At the end of the night, and this is to your point, there were 3 wards, Marple 5-1, 5-2, and 5-3. We had 3 scanners. Ours was off by 1. We had 1 extra vote in our scanner. 5-3 was short 1 vote. We spent hours going through the book, checking the book, the handwritten book, to make sure that every single vote matched. We did that till 10 o'clock at night. We then printed it out and we put the results on the wall. In the meantime, there were Republican and Democrat watchers watching everything we did. So frankly, I feel insulted that people would say that, somehow we took votes from bags and scanned them into the machine. They wouldn't have matched. There'd have been, let's just say there was 500 people that voted, and I somehow snuck away and could input these votes into the scanner without anybody seeing me. At the end of the night, there'd have been, more votes in the scanner than there were in our book. So it would not have matched. It was impossible to have done anything. I then was brought back months later in Chester, again, braved COVID, sat there with my bag, with my results. Everything was taped. I wasn't allowed to open it. I presented it to the people that were checking it. They checked it against their boxes and what they had. So I don't know where all this is coming from. I'm just, as a private citizen who gave their time, who watched this, it was done very well, and I'm very impressed with, I know you weren't there, and I do agree, if we had had 1 scanner, it would have saved us at least an hour in trying to find that 1 ballot that somebody from 5-3 had scanned into our scanner. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service. So, real quickly, roughly half of our precincts used to receive 2 scanners, 2 ballot scanners. And I arrived here in March, late March. It was actually right by April 1 of 2021. So it was too late to reverse that for the May 2021 primary. But I very strongly told the staff over and over again that that second scanner in half of those precincts is going away. And some of them pushed back and warned me. They said, oh, you'll get huge reaction from poll workers and judges of election who feel that this is a matter of prestige based on the size of their precinct. And I said, I'll deal with that. I said, but the idea of programming additional scanners, logic and accuracy testing additional scanners, loading additional scanners, having that many more V drives, one V drive per precinct, having the potential for problems with it on election day, having the judges and poll workers set up an additional scanner, and then having to pack it up at the end of the night, having to bring 2 ballot bags instead of 1. It's one of these things that cascades across it. It's the proverbial stone in the pond. It has all kinds of ripple effects. And everybody here, I'm telling you, knows that one of the things I said, and initially it was unpopular, was we are going to 1 scanner per precinct. We're getting rid of that second scanner in half the precincts. That was what was discussed on that video. The other thing we got rid of were the pads that used to have videos. I thought it patently silly for us to get involved in charging and programming 428 pads for videos that we could put on YouTube that people can access on their phones. And it was just one more thing to go wrong and to break down. And as anybody in my staff knows, we're here to try to simplify things for our voters and our poll workers. And that was what I strive to do. I've got 1,100 witnesses from those 200 plus precincts who know that they used to have 2 scanners and they haven't since the November 2021 election. So that video is more than misleading. It's intentionally misrepresenting a conversation, and it cuts off right at the most salient point when a staff member saying, I'm telling you, and then it cuts off. So I'm here to tell you that the fact that you believe in that video, I've got 1,100 witnesses. We got rid of the second scanner. You can go through the poll books. You can go through our instruction manuals and realize that at one point we had 2 scanners and now we don't. But thank you for letting me clear the air. No, please.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Any other individuals who have not made public comment? All right, Mr. Allen, what is the precise, just for the record, our date of our next meeting?
Or Tuesday this month, so that's 27, 14 days.
Okay. With that, any other comments from the board or the solicitor, Mr. Allen? Nope. All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. I'm going to call to order the September 13, 2022 Registration Commission agenda. Hold it. Jerry.
Yeah. And I didn't catch you like I did sometimes with him.
I usually call him. Let's call it to order, and please, Ms. Wintermont, if you have a report.
Good afternoon. I don't have that much of a report. I was hoping at the next meeting I can have some application statistics. We've seen a very high influx in voter registration drives, the mail coming in that I think me and my staff can actually relate to how it looked back in 2016. So it has been a lot in the most recent weeks. Yes.
Any public comment on voter registration?
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
So let's move to adjourn all meetings. All those in favor?
Aye.